across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home and Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's just coming up 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, as always, great to have your company. If you miss anything from the show or anything from yesterday's show, we had a rip-roaring one yesterday, I promise you. Go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, Rachel Reeves is accused of using the head of the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, Richard Hughes, as a human shield after he was forced to quit amid a fiasco that saw his organisation leak the budget and saw the Chancellor accused of misrepresenting its forecast. But is she clinging on by her fingernails? She's now battling to save her political career, facing mounting calls from not just the Conservatives and Reform to step down after she was accused of misleading the public in the run-up. Meanwhile, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, has said courts cannot cling to jury trials for the sake of what he calls just tradition. Yeah, 810 years of tradition, mate. The Justice Secretary told critics of his plan to scrap thousands of jury trials every year that the only way to avoid the what he called total collapse of trust in the justice system was bold and meaningful change, yet ripping it into shreds. Well, I'll be speaking to Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick in just a couple of moments' time. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is also back in the news. He's accused junior doctors, or resident doctors, as we now call them, of a cynical attempt to wreck Christmas. BMA Grinches, eh? After they announced 5 more days of walkouts just in the run-up to Christmas over their 26% pay demands and demands for more training jobs. It's the 3rd round of strikes since July, but 5 days on the picket lines last month as well. All that coming up, plenty more besides. I'd love to hear your thoughts, as you know, on any of the stories of the day. In particular, I want to talk about jury trials. You know, this is something I think we feel very strongly about on this station. Justice Secretary David Lammy saying courts can't cling on to jury trials for the sake of tradition amid lengthy court delays. What's your reaction to that? Is it jury trials that's bringing the delays? Because pretty much everyone expert on justice says that's not the case. Well, give us a call. Let us know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. If you work in the system, if you've been on a jury, can't tell us what happened in the jury room, but if you're a barrister, hey, if you're a High Court judge, feel free to call in. Or, let's face it, more likely, if you've been convicted of a crime by a jury. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Get in touch on talk at 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate altogether. Now, text costs £1, standard network rate message. Let me introduce you to my guest joining me in the studio all today. That's Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, looking very dashing, double-breasted suit and no Movember tash. Thank goodness. Yeah. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And just you and not the tash.
Yes, I know. We wished it could be here, but, you know, it's retired for another year.
It's gone on. Thank
gone
the
on a retreat.
Lord for that. Anyway, David Lammy would have scrapped it if he'd had a chance, just to let you know. We're going to come to you a little bit later, swapping the show around a little bit, because we're delighted to say that joining us right now on College Green, outside the House of the Parliament, is Shadow Justice Secretary, Conservative MP, Robert Jenrick. A very good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Lots to talk about, a lot of it involving David Lammy. First up, though, can I ask you about our good friend, Rachel Reeves, who, against all our better judgment, is still the Chancellor of the Exchequer today, despite the boss of the Office for Budget Responsibility being forced out after the, clown country, banana republic level mess up by the OBR, accidentally putting up without any password protection that was meaningful the budget a couple of hours before they were supposed to put it up on last Wednesday's budget day. He's gone. There was a technical mess up. It was incompetence. She, we're pretty sure, deliberately lied about what was going to be in the budget. How come he's gone and she's still in a job?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Julia. It was correct for Richard Hughes to step down. He's done the right thing. But why the heck is Rachel Reeves still in a job? Surely tanking the economy, breaking all your promises, potential market manipulation and flagrantly misleading the public, including in press conferences at number 10 Downing Street, is more serious than accidentally releasing a budget document online a couple of hours too early.
And especially when we've seen most of the budget
get
before
a backbone
anyway.
And get rid of her.
Well, it does. A lot of people are saying...
Well, we knew everything that was in the budget anyway.
Indeed. A lot of people are saying that basically the Prime Minister can't get rid of her because he also knew that the OBR had told her that actually there wasn't this big black hole. She said it very publicly. He's now, you know, basically gone on record completely backing her, arms round her, very supportive. Basically, if she goes, he'd have to go too. Is he keeping her as basically a shield?
Totally. Look, Prime Ministers know everything that goes in the budget. Their chancellors sit in the cabinet room and talk them through all of the details. So the idea that Reeves knew this but Starmer didn't is for the birds. The two of them are in this together, up to their necks. If she goes, he goes. And to be honest, the sooner the better.
Well, we shall wait and see if that happens. Many saying might have to wait until after the local elections next May. Well, let's talk about something more specific to your brief as Shadow Justice Secretary, and that is the announcement we're expecting the Commons today from the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, about scrapping jury trials. Now, last week we got a leak of a memo which suggested he was looking at scrapping jury trials for pretty much anyone going to court, unless they were being accused of the most serious crimes, murder, manslaughter, rape and a few others. But we're now told it's watered down. From what we know so far from his interviews today, what are we looking at?
Well, look, Julia, we laugh at Calamity Lammy, that he's the court jester of this terrible government, but actually this is very serious. This is dangerous. The erosion of more than 800 years of our rights, going back to Magna Carta, in fact, before that. It means that in almost every case, serious cases will be being decided by judges alone and not by juries. David Lammy has been out touring the media today claiming that this will just be cases like someone nicking a Mars bar, but that's complete rubbish. It includes terrorist offences, coercive control, sexual offences, very serious crimes. And my view is that if you get accused of those things, it is your right, and has been for generations, to go before a jury and have 12 ordinary Brits decide your fate, not a so-called educated judge alone. At the heart of this is the fact that Labour do not trust ordinary people to be at the heart of our criminal justice system and to make these absolutely critical decisions about their fellow citizens.
I think you're right. I think this ties in massively with that general view of we call, the lanyard classes, that if only you put the technocrats in charge and the clever people in charge, and don't let people vote for things like Brexit or anything silly like that, and you just have the clever educated people in charge, then things will be much better. And that view goes to juries. But is there any evidence, and you've been Shadow Justice Secretary for a while, is there any evidence that juries are unable to understand cases? I mean, there are some epic, 2-year-long fraud cases where forensic accountants struggle, but maybe there are some tiny examples like that. But in the case of a murder or a manslaughter or a rape, surely the whole point of it is 2012, ordinary people just like you who are deciding on your guilt or your innocence.
Yes, that's right. And it's an incredibly important safeguard as well, that firstly, the art of barristers is to distill even complex cases into simple terms so that everyone, the defendant, the victim, members of the public, can understand what's going on and what is at stake in the case. It's not simply something so complex and erudite that only judges and legal experts can comprehend. And secondly, it provides a safety valve so that judges, ordinary people, can step in the tiny number of cases where something completely perverse would be happening. I'll give you an example from the events immediately after the Southport attacks. 2 people, very prominently, were before the courts. One was called Jamie Michael, a veteran, who posted something on social media that was wrong, and no doubt he regretted it afterwards. But he went before a jury, and they said that this was a man of previous good character who'd put his life on the line for his country, and they acquitted him. Another, Lucy Connolly, also did something wrong, a reprehensible tweet. She didn't go before a jury, and a judge found her guilty and ultimately sentenced her
But she
to
pleaded
31
guilty.
months in
She
prison.
pleaded guilty.
She pleaded guilty, but we can only ask, if she'd gone before a jury, would they have found her guilty? I suspect they wouldn't have done.
I absolutely agree with you.
That is an important safeguard, a safety valve that exists in our system, and which for generations people have said is an important part of our system. And also, as you say, there's no evidence that juries are incapable. In fact, ironically, David Lammy himself wrote a report not so long ago, the David Lammy report, one of the conclusions of which was that juries are actually better placed at coming up with fair and equitable decisions, including decisions which avoid bias and discrimination against people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds.
Yeah, and indeed, and this is one of the key things, as we know that most judges are basically white, posh men, and therefore not representative. Now, I'm of the view that most judges may well be able to take that aspect of them out when they're making a judgment out of their considerations. But how do we know that? And especially with the concern about politicised judges, especially given now, you don't get appointed as a judge unless you toe the line on certain politically correct issues, and that is going to impact their careers if they don't on some of these cases. Crucial thing here is David Lammy is justifying whatever change there's going to be, and it looks like it's going to be more limited than the memo that was leaked last week. Getting rid of, for instance, he was suggesting in interviews today, those either way cases where so it's not either automatically tried in the magistrate court or automatically tried in the Crown Court, but numerous cases where it's kind of in between, and where, you can choose to go to the court. You may well then get off, but you also may face a longer sentence, or you could be tried in the magistrate court. He's saying getting rid of those. But again, someone who's good character or their future career rests on that innocent verdict may well feel very strongly about wanting to go to a jury, will no longer have that right. His claim is that we've got massive delays in the justice system, that people, if you're a victim of rape, your women are waiting 4 or 5 years for justice. I sat on a jury a couple of years ago. It was a 3-year-old case then. We've had delays before COVID, exacerbated by COVID. Is there any evidence that it is jury trials that are creating those delays?
No, not much, anyway. The report that David Lammy, or his predecessor, commissioned by Sir Brian Leveson, concludes that jury trials make a very modest impact. Maybe a jury trial is at best 20% longer than a judge-led trial. So this is going to make a small difference to the problem, and with a big cost, the erosion of an ancient liberty in our country. The truth is, we've got to get the courts sitting more often than they are today. In fact, if all the courts had been sitting in our country over the course of the last year, then the backlog would have gone down by 5,000 to 10,000 cases, when in fact it's gone up during that period. This morning there will be courtrooms sat empty the length and breadth of the country. That's what we've got to fix, and the myriad of other inefficiencies in this old-fashioned paper-based system, rather than going for what David Lammy thinks is the easy lever, which is scrapping an ancient liberty. With very little evidence this is going to make the difference that he hopes. But
isn't the backlog something in the region of 80,000 cases? And let's face it, a lot of this happened under the Tory watch. You weren't Justice Secretary, fair enough, but it happened under the Tory watch. Massive underinvestment in the criminal justice system. Criminal justice can't do it on the cheap if you want to do it fairly.
I think that's right. And look, don't get me wrong, it's frankly shameful that a woman could be raped right now and her accused, her perpetrator, wouldn't come to court till maybe 2030. That's a disgrace, and we've got to fix that. But this isn't the answer. The answer is investing more in the criminal justice system, as you rightly say, fixing the problems of the criminal bar, which is on its knees at the moment, getting this old-fashioned system back up to speed with a better run court system. But we don't need to scrap something that has existed in our country since at least Magna Carta. That is a real crying shame. And David Lammy just needs to trust ordinary people and do the hard yards of governing this country. And frankly, if it is about money, well, Rachel Reeves has found £16 billion for benefits last week. Most people in this country would rather a bit more money was spent on our criminal justice system than on benefits and illegal migrants.
Well, hear to that. I certainly agree to that. Is there any way of stopping this from happening? I mean, look, this wasn't in the Labour manifesto. They have no public mandate for doing this. It's certainly not got support from, as it would appear, judges, the barristers, all the public, even with the massive majority in the Commons. Can this be stopped in the laws? Can it be stopped in any other way?
But we're going to fight this every step of the way. It doesn't have a manifesto commitment behind it, as really important constitutional changes like this should do. And David Lammy, in his own inimitable way, seems to have united everyone in British politics against him and his proposals, from Jeremy Corbyn on one side to myself and Nigel Farage on the other. Only Calamity Lammy is capable of doing this. We're going to fight this, and I hope we can win, as in fact people did in the past when Tony Blair tried to do the same thing 20 years ago, and preserve this right for future generations.
Right, well, let's move on from talking about people who are coming up and being tried and found guilty or innocent to the people who've been found guilty, who've been sent to prison and who are then released. Now, it's been bad enough. We've had a load of prisoners who've been released early because prisons are full, but we've also had prisoners who've been released accidentally, and only a little while ago we discovered that it had risen from 115 in 23-24 to 262 last year. Justice Secretary has admitted today that 12 more prisoners have been accidentally released in the past 3 weeks, 2 of whom are apparently still at large. What do you say to that?
It's a complete shambles. 3 weeks ago, David Lammy reluctantly came to Parliament and said that as a result of the mistaken releases, he was putting in place the strongest ever checks to prevent this happening, and that he was on the case. What's actually happened? Well, since then, we've now learnt that 12 prisoners have been accidentally released, some of whom he's admitted are dangerous and sexual offenders, and at least 2 of them are still on the run. He won't say who they are, where they are, what efforts the police are doing to try and track these people down. And it's obvious that his interventions have completely failed. Rather than stopping this problem, it's actually got worse. It was that every other day a prisoner was being accidentally released. Now it's more often than that. Everything this man touches seems to turn to ashes, and it's very serious because these dangerous criminals are out on the streets. Their victims will be rightly worried today that they might be coming back to cause more havoc and mayhem in their lives. Lammy has got to get a grip and end this fiasco.
Can we hold him personally responsible? If you were if you were Justice Secretary now instead of Shadow, would you be personally responsible for every prison officer who accidentally releases somebody who's not supposed to be released?
Well, look, he sits atop a big and complex criminal justice system, and you can't hold him to account for absolutely everything, but he did know that this problem was happening because we identified it a month or so ago when these first criminals came to light as being out on the run from Epping and from Wandsworth. Now it's his responsibility to step in and grip this thing, and he clearly isn't doing this. In fact, today it was revealed he hasn't even been to Wandsworth prison, the prison that was in complete chaos. So what is this man doing? He's part-time Justice Secretary, part-time Deputy Prime Minister, swanning around, not fixing the problems that he's responsible for. All the while, the public are actually in danger. So he really needs to step up now and fix this problem once and for all.
Well, at least last week he had an excuse for about 15 minutes when he got trapped in the security system outside the House of Lords when his car was going in and he couldn't actually get out or go backwards and he got stuck. But apparently another bit of an issue with one of his drivers. But, you know where David Lammy's history is on that. Anyway, Robert Jenrick, such a pleasure to have you on the show. Conservative Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick there live from College Green outside Parliament. I mean, let's be honest, I mean, let's face it, the way we all talk about Calamity Lammy, I mean, he's really not very good at his job, is it? It's simple as that. Benedict Spence, listening to all of that, just coming back in on the prisoners, because you do sort of wonder, how hard is it? You've got people behind bars and list of people who are supposed to be released on any particular day, people who aren't supposed to be released. I do struggle with how you could accidentally release somebody. I don't really understand how this happens.
I'm not surprised by this at all, though. The actual state of things in our prisons is appalling. Every couple of weeks we get stories about prison officers, prison guards that have been found to have facilitated criminality in prisons, carrying on, having affairs with prisoners. The number of female officers that work in male prisons absolutely astounds me. Who on earth thought this was a great idea? I know we're all supposed to be all feminist and balanced and women can do any old job, but that would have seemed to me like a really obvious one that shouldn't be done because it seems to just keep happening. And maybe I'm being a little unfair.
Not all women prison officers are having sex with prisoners.
As I just said, maybe I'm being a little unfair to the general amount, but it seems to be happening rather a lot more than it should. It should be 0, and it's several cases this year that I'm aware of alone.
Yeah.
And I really wish that I wasn't aware of this sort of thing, but it keeps happening.
I'm going to say that's the least of my worries, opposed to people who are, it could be somebody who's convicted rapist who's on the streets right now.
It shouldn't be the least of your worries at all. If you can actually form an emotional relationship, a sexual relationship with a prisoner, what else would you do for them? Would you bring things in for them? Would you maybe be the person who accidentally releases them because you signed the form?
And what about jury trials?
This is so basic. Okay, now I'm going to be controversial to everybody listening, because everybody's got their own favourite thing. There'll be pensioners listening, there'll be people with children listening, there'll be people with healthcare issues listening. There shouldn't be there shouldn't be a single penny of public money spent on any of those things unless justice is guaranteed. The state has no legitimacy without security, liberty,
securing the borders, securing the law and order on the streets, and justice.
Without those three things, it has no legitimacy.
And you can't do it on the cheap.
You cannot.
It's priceless.
No, and I'm afraid to say, actually, though, as much as you said, and much as Robert Jenrick said, actually, people want money to be spent on this. No, they don't. No, they don't. And that's why George Osborne calculated correctly that he could get away with cutting all of this, because he knew full well people think it's never going to bother me, it's never going to affect me. I'm never going to be a prisoner, so it doesn't matter. I don't want prisoners to have anything. I don't think lawyers should be paid. This doesn't matter to me. Now here we are, where rapists don't go to prison for years at a time. But
also, by the way, people accused of crimes they haven't committed also have it hanging over them for years. Let's also look at that side of things as well. We're going to take a quick break. I want to hear your thoughts on everything Robert Jenrick had to say. In particular, I want to talk about David Lammy saying that courts can't cling on to jury trials just for the sake of tradition. Well, I don't think Magna Carta counts as just tradition. This is a fundamental building block of our justice system, which is a fundamental building block of our democracy, which, by the way, just a few years ago was something that David Lammy himself believed. There's no evidence that it's jury trials that are holding up the system anyway. It's the lack of judges and barristers and courts that are open, because that's about money. They don't pay jurors. I know, I was a juror. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 10:26 is the time. I'm going to go to your calls in just a few moments. Just Benedict Spence still with me, and still talking about jury trials. And it is fascinating that the view of so many people who think, there is an issue in our court system. We had this from former directors of public prosecutions and the like, and they always bring up rape trials. That's always the one. The main issue with rape trials is there aren't very many of them, but because as a general rule, it's impossible to decide between a man says something, a woman says something. It is a he said, she said. There is no evidence. Often, in the case of date rapes, that awful phrase, there's a huge amount of alcohol involved, and frankly, you're not going to get a beyond reasonable doubt verdict. But there has been a real push, hasn't there? This idea that juries somehow are too emotional. They can be led by a barrister or a clever, even like a clever lag, a suspect who is who's committed God knows how many crimes. I've sat in as a news reporter on cases where I'm aware that this person's got 20 former convictions, but of course the jury's not allowed to know that as long as he doesn't plead good character, and then they're found guilty, and then you find out, oh my God, they've committed these horrible offences against children how many other times, and it is very difficult, but that's not a problem with having juries. That's a problem with the system.
It is, but also, the fact that rape is used very emotively in this situation. Lammy is doing this because he knows what he's doing, because everybody goes, rapists, those are terrible people, the worst ones. And if we don't do this, that means that rapists won't go to prison. Well, then we must allow this. And I think that's pretty revolting, actually. Yes, everybody understands that rape trials have a particularly low conviction rate, and even fewer of them actually get to trial in the first place because of the nature of the burden of evidence. That doesn't mean actually we should rip up everything just so that rape trials are prioritised, or also just so that we improve the figures on rape. How do you improve the figures? Because you will inevitably also therefore convict people who perhaps are not guilty.
Have seen a whole spate of those.
But I would also just say very carefully on this subject, if we're going to go down that route of saying, well, juries can be very emotional, they can be very led, well, there is another argument then, and it actually goes down racial lines. We now have 20% more or less of the population in this country are ethnic minorities. In Singapore, they got rid of jury trials for this very specific reason. People do vote on juries on ethnic lines.
And we see that in America hugely, the O.J. Simpson trial.
Is that something that we actually want to get to a position where we're saying, well, you can't trust juries because in certain parts of the countries they'll always acquit somebody? That is a really bad advertisement for our lack of integration, if that's what we're potentially going to be saying. And if you make the argument for rape cases, it's a very short step to then say, well, they're going to acquit people because they're a Muslim or they're black or they're something else.
But it does fundamentally come down to complete lack of trust in people, and I think there's an argument for having a balance of like men and women and people of different ethnicities and different backgrounds. Certainly the jury I sat on had a massive big range of people from different backgrounds, and again there used to be the fact that basically the professional classes could get out of it, and you can't anymore, and I think that has to be balanced. There was a point when it was basically unemployed and pensioners, and actually there's an argument for having everybody has to do their bit, but there's also an argument that you've got to be reasonable about people who run their own businesses. It's like, I can't sit on a 3-month trial. I run my own business. I won't have any clients left. Let's go to a call on this. 0344 499 1000. Ian is on the line in Nottingham. Hello, Ian. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to say that I've got no faith at all in having just a judge, and if I could I give you a few reasons?
Absolutely.
Okay, to me, they're politicised now, very left-wing, a lot of them. Some of them are past it, quite frankly. Now, you think just recently, convicted rapists or illegal immigrants have been allowed to stay despite failing all checks to stay here because of things like, and I've written them down, too many tattoos, I'm alcoholic, I'm now a Christian, I'm bisexual, I've fallen out with my family, if I go back they'll kill me, I belong to the wrong sect. There's about 50. If judges are letting people stay here on spurious reasons, are they that stupid or are they just woke?
Well, that's it. I mean, those are asylum judges, but you're right. I mean, they've gone through the same training, haven't they? I think there is massively an issue. We've even had judges who've basically said that, not giving. I mean, they're in charge of actually the actual term of imprisonment or any sentence someone gets. The jury doesn't get to decide that. But it is fascinating when they've been, say, Just Stop Oil and Green protesters, where the judge has said, well, but you are doing it for a cause you believe in strongly, so I'll let you off. Like, hold on a minute. So I'm a Brexiteer. I believe in Brexit strongly, so I'm allowed to just go and cause vandalism and criminal damage, am I? I mean, it's absurd. It's just if they agree with it, We also know, look, judges are affected by magistrates about whether or not someone turns up to court in a suit and a tie.
Yeah, well, just to finish my point, you think Lucy Connolly, for words, got longer, twice as long as somebody that I've found an actual case,
an
Afghani who raped a child, and he was given a shorter sentence. I would rather somebody said nasty words to me than rape me. I know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm very clear on that as well. No, exactly. That's well known, that contrast, and that is the reality. What do you make of the fact that actually we're told, judges are looking at these things very clearly. They can see, they've got all the different aspects of the case, the mitigating, the aggregating factors, and yet different judges will often come up with completely different, not just verdicts, but sentences as well.
I just go by the fact that everybody that I speak to, family, friends, these judges get the most ridiculous decisions coming out. And I think if they're going to get it wrong as often, do you really want to say your future decided by one person?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the thing. Juries will also get things wrong, but it's a better chance that they won't get it wrong because there's 12 of them. Thank you so much, Ian. Benedict Spence, that's an interesting point, actually. Sir Brian Leveson, who looked at this, he suggested, you had basically a judge with 2 lay magistrates. But again, they're all cut from the same cloth, the sort of people who become magistrates. I've got friends who are judges and friends who are magistrates. Yeah. I know this, And so they're still not sort of, your bog standard, ordinary, person walking down the street going to a cafe. I mean, they're not.
I think people would be surprised by how many judges actually in our system are actually still quite right-wing and are simply hamstrung by the guidelines that are given down to them. That is as much a part of the problem. The same politicians who are saying, oh, the juries are the problem, are the same ones that effectively tell the judges, these are the sentences you have to pass.
Very interesting point. 10:33 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to get to a more conversation about, well, the future of Rachel Reeves and indeed the juniors' doctor strike. Are they, as the Health Secretary claims, trying to wreck Christmas with yet another strike? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. By the way, if you're wondering why your talkTV app doesn't work, it's because you need to download the Talk app. That's where all your favourite shows, all your podcasts can be found. The Talk app. Go to where you got your last one, App Store, whatever it is, and that's where we are. Right now, Benedict Spence still with me, Conservative commentator. Get some more calls up on the board. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's talk a little bit more, because obviously we had Robert Jenrick on very early on to cover a lot of these topics, but let's talk about Rachel Reeves. It was really interesting to see yesterday the OBR chief had to fall on his sword, Richard Hughes, after the leak of last week's budget. People were saying, oh, it's 45 minutes early. No, it was 45 minutes before she was due to speak. But they're supposed to release it like the moment she sits down. So what's that, 50 minutes later? So it was almost 2 hours early. And it turns out, basically, it's just not really properly password protected. It sits there on a URL. Could have happened. I mean, literally, you had one job, which was to come up with all these budget figures and then keep them quiet and private until the Chancellor sat down and you messed up on the other half of the job. He absolutely has to go. Utter abject incompetence. That is that is simple leadership fail. Oh, how do we release this and how do we keep it safe until? If you didn't ask that question or, you didn't care, you're no good at that job. Well, I don't care how good an economist you are. However, there's a lot of talk that he was kind of forced out and that actually they weren't going to be pushing for him to go in the Treasury. But because he released this document basically saying, these are the facts that we told the Chancellor and they were completely contrary to what the Chancellor told the public and the Cabinet and the media and the Commons, that they were quite happy to go... Bye. I
mean, given that Rachel Reeves' office did rather quickly say after this happened that she retained full confidence in him, to then actually push him out does suggest that there's a certain sort of, if you like, chaotic...
Well, did they push him out, though? I mean, the report said this was a top leadership fail.
I think that they did it in the same way that a football club says, well, the board backs the manager and then he loses the next game and he's gone. Everybody knows that when they say, we're back the manager, that means, oh, it's not looking good. That's what I think this is.
The Prime Minister is backing the Chancellor.
Yeah, it doesn't say stability. The Prime Minister has to back the Chancellor because if the Chancellor goes, the Prime Minister will go.
Do you think that is the key thing? Is she now his human shield?
Yes, and he is her human shield, and then there was a human shield before him, and that's kind of how this government works. Lots of people stood in front, much like the Soviet Union at Stalingrad. Lots of people in front of the officers getting shot. As long as the officers at the back don't get shot, it's fine, you can still hypothetically win the war. That's pretty much the Starmer attitude. Yeah. They're all in the bunker, they can see that, well, not the Wehrmacht, obviously, but things are not looking great, and so they're pushing everything out in front of them to hope that it all works out well.
Absolutely someone who is, everyone out for themselves, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
It's fascinating watching him, and he gave that press conference, he gave a speech about welfare reform. Like, mate, you've just put welfare spending up 16 billion quid when everyone knows that the whole point of the reform is to cut the spending. Shush, the grown-ups are talking, Prime Minister. But when he was answering questions, some of which were even longer than mine, thanks Beth Rigby, but I mean, geez, good grief. You can see everyone else sitting there going, finish the question, love. As you do with mine, I'm sure. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right now.
Being so
I've got competition, I know, exactly. No, but genuinely, like, he looks so irritated and frankly, I think outraged sometimes that people are daring to question him.
Yeah, of course he is. He thinks that he knows better than everybody. This is ultimately the sort of individual that he is, and it does, I think, come from... It's funny, of course, we were talking about lawyers and the legal system earlier, about the sort of almost divine rectitude of lawyers. Well, here we have the former Director of Public Prosecutions, absolutely certain. And even amongst lawyers, the stories about the arrogance of Keir Starmer pretty well known. But I think also it's no, we don't have time for that, maybe later. It's one of those things though where even set that to one side, the fact that everything is going so wrong will irk him so massively, because of course he will be looking for reasons, he will be looking for scapegoats, and they just, as much as anything else, they fall so quickly. He's already lost so many ministers over the course of the first 18 months.
Chiefs of staff.
You're sort of looking around just thinking, my word, it's actually impressive that Lammy is still there. I think you have to give him credit for that he's not had to resign or be sacked up to this point. But the reality is...
we know why Lammy's still there.
Yeah, I think we all know why Lammy's still there. But realistically, it's the same reason ultimately as Reeves. Once one of the big dominoes goes, then it starts the run on the actual top jobs themselves. And then the Prime Minister hasn't got anybody to sort of, protect them.
Well,
once you've got the top team still in place, it was bad enough when Angela Rayner went and everybody was going, oh, this doesn't look good.
But they're all firing outside right now.
He's weathered that storm. But if we're honest here, if Reeves goes, and she's not going to last the full term, then it's open season. Then the starting gun is fired on him, because she's as big as
but again, if what she's done, which is quite clearly with Chris Mason at the BBC, political at the BBC, I mean, he's someone I absolutely trust and admire. I have no idea what his politics are. That's part of the reason why he's so good. He's politically neutral. Yeah. When he very calmly and very occasionally concludes yesterday, the public have been misled by the Chancellor deliberately. On what basis can she remain in her job? What politics do we have if she can lie to us? Consistent again and again and again, and she's still in her job.
Can I be honest? Because I think that's what they expect. Genuinely, I think when we have this thing about, the Prime Minister, the party, the government, they've broken the manifesto plate, nobody cares. Nobody cares anymore.
We expected.
We expect, exactly, that's the point. It would be a miracle if somebody stuck to their manifesto. We expect them to lie. It doesn't make us feel good about them, But
it's
not a
actually
shock.
it really damages
It is,
our view of politics. I mean, it's quite interesting. Nigel Farage last time round, I mean, he said he didn't have a manifesto because no one believes them anyway.
Yeah.
But actually didn't have a manifesto because they'd only just got together. They didn't have a whole load of policies. It was like, they knew they weren't going to win the election, so it wasn't quite so relevant. But maybe we need that sort of honesty.
If I'm going to be honest, though, because what's really funny, of course, is that often when we hear about sort of lying in politics, what lots of people double down on is the previous Tory administration. They talk about people like Boris Johnson, they talk about lockdown, they talk about Brexit. If we're honest here, the thing that really broke it, I think, for everybody was under Blair, and I think it was probably Iraq. That's the thing. And to be honest, that was huge. I think that was huge. I think that moment...
I still think that we should have... The Iraq invasion should have gone ahead, but I think the dossier was lies.
Again, no, that's what I mean.
Those two things can both be true at the same time.
Of course they can both be true at the same time. There's... not to get down the route of going into Iraq this afternoon, but there was no moral world in which you can say, yes, Saddam Hussein, that's fine, we can just allow that to happen if we're also against the idea of tyranny and fascism. But that's as an aside. The Iraq dossier, I think, was a seismic moment, actually, where it was just sort of taken as so brazen that the government could lie on these things in a situation where people's lives were going to be destroyed, taken... Well, of course he did. Of course he did. But with a lower majority.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher got re-elected with lower majorities each time too. I mean, governments get elected with lower majorities.
Of course, but also you have to then look at what the alternative was. What was it that the Conservatives were putting up? Not a great deal at that moment in time.
Very, very interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Let's also talk about junior doctors. Wes Street and the Health Secretary's accused junior doctors of a cynical attempt to wreck Christmas. They've announced 5 more days of walkouts, December the 17th from 7 a.m. until the 22nd of December at 7 a.m. They're demanding a 26% pay rise. They're also, this is the third round of strikes since July, also asking for more training places for doctors. Now, I'm with them on the training place. You've got 30,000 doctors looking for training places, and I think there are only 10,000 places in total that are available. Well, that's stupid. Why are we... Why are we importing doctors from abroad, often trained in places where actually the training ain't up to scratch with many of our with the training in our country, and we've got a load of unemployed doctors in this country who we have spent 250 grand plus training up ourselves, and they're in massive debt too. That is insane. That is crazy. One of the reasons we've got delays in our system is we haven't got enough medical professionals working. And then they're going to pay a fortune while they're on strike to probably the same doctors to do a shift at a different hospital on a different day. While I mean, it literally is. It is absolutely insane asylum level stuff.
Yeah. I think more money does need to be made available for doctors' pay, not for these doctors, but to get those ones who are currently not working in the NHS back into work, and to get rid of all of the doctors who are because they're being brought over here because they are cheaper. That is the fundamental thing, is that actually that's the reason why we're prepared to accept, and it is substandard service, because you said, the standards are not up to scratch in some places.
In
some
India,
places,
you can get someone else to do your medical exams for you.
That's what I was going to say. In some places, they don't actually exist. It is a scam. And actually, you want to take a look at the figures when it comes to things like medical misconduct in the NHS, the sheer proportion of them that are foreign-born doctors.
It's about 3/4, I think, of foreign-trained doctors.
Yeah, and when you consider that one of the biggest killers in the NHS is literally clinical error, a doctor making a mistake, you think, that ought to be quite a big scandal. But that's beside the point.
Apart from the fact that we've got a load of bright young people who want to be doctors, we need a load of bright young people to be doctors, and we train them up, pay a fortune, and then we don't have jobs for them. And then we employ people from the third world. I mean, it's absolutely mad.
We need more money for doctors to bring them into the healthcare profession who are already in this country.
But I think there are an awful lot of people. People go. I think their basic pay now is like 54 grand. They can earn more than that. I'm intensely relaxed about that. These people have done 7 years of training. They are top students. They're doing a very difficult job, life and death. I'm very, very, very happy for these people to be paid well. And I'm much, much happier. That 16 billion that went on welfare. I would rather that money went on doctors. Here's the thing, all those people who apparently can't working age, because of their various ailments and sickness and disability.
Or need new cars.
Or need new cars. I mean, maybe if we had more doctors in the system, treating them, getting to them earlier, therapists, psychologists, maybe we could actually get these people back to work, save a load of money.
But of course, we all know why more money is going on welfare, because of this critical mass of people on welfare in Labour voting constituencies, and the MPs are terrified. And how we've got ourselves into the situation, I think a lot more people, possibly in right-leaning constituencies, in Tory and Reform-leading constituencies, would probably respect the government a lot more, maybe even inclined to give them their vote, if they did the mature thing and said, well, we're going to face down this massive trend of giving people welfare, even even if it risks my own seat. I think people will go, do you know what, that's principled. But what they do is they look at it right now and they go, it's the opposite of principled. It's bribery, it's pork barrelling.
I've had someone message me on X saying, so this is how many jobs. There are lots more people out of work, of working age than there are jobs available. Yeah. And they say, well, you're going to give advice to these parents who are now getting all these extra benefits for their kids to get back to work. I'm like, yeah, more than happy to get a job. But again, why are we importing in hundreds of thousands of people, largely from the third world, to do jobs when we're told there aren't enough jobs for the people here? No, they just won't take the jobs that are on offer. That's a completely different equation. But they will when they're hungry enough. Let's go to one more quick call. Mark is in Cheshire. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
And I'm Julia. You're Mark.
And I'm Benedict.
She's Benedict. Mark, you wanted to talk about jury trials, didn't you?
Yep. First of all, I'd like to probably start off by saying that I'm no fan of David Lammy. I mean,
Who is? David Lammy's a fan of David Lammy.
Yeah. I don't mind politicians being ideologically opposed to me, my own views, but I just don't think he has the intellectual capacity to kind of be across all the material.
Yep.
However, on the issue of trials without jury, I'm sympathising with him, and I'm on his side to a large extent, simply because of my own experience with juries and my wife's experience with juries.
Were you in the jury or were you being tried?
No, I was a juror. That was my wife. So I served in a jury at St Albans Crown Court when we lived down south.
I just want to clarify, just so you know, legally, you cannot tell us what happened in the jury room. That is a criminal offence. Just want to clarify before you speak.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to be vague, that's fine, but you can't.
Yes. Okay. I'll try and be as vague as I can be. In some ways, I found it a very uplifting experience because there were 12 people there who really cared.
That's what I felt. Yeah.
But on the other hand, trying to convince two of the jurors of the defendant's guilt was nigh on impossible. We eventually managed it.
Right, I'm sorry. I think I know this sounds so crazy for me to say because you're not talking about a specific case people know about, but it's actually criminal offence for both you and me asking you. So I'm going to have to. Can we just talk just very generally? Just so you there was a feeling that two of the jurors weren't seeing the case accurately. You felt, and basically, what was the end of the case in the end?
The defendant was found guilty, but on the slightest thing, it was very difficult to convince.
But didn't they have the right to see the case differently from you?
They misunderstood certain points of it.
You think they didn't understand it?
Yeah.
Do you think the right verdict was delivered in the end?
Eventually, yes.
Well, in which case it worked?
Maybe it did in that case, but in
you worry in others it wouldn't. Okay.
Who served at the Old Bailey? The right verdict definitely wasn't served because the judge was so disgusted with the verdict they couldn't come to a unanimous decision that it went to a retrial, and the barrister in question, who was the defendant's barrister, basically told the defendant that he's not going to, lightning wouldn't strike twice again, and to plead guilty.
Oh, that's interesting. But here's the thing, maybe the barrister should have done a better job in that case. In the first trial, Mark in Cheshire, thank you very much indeed. I think we've sidestepped some legal issues. So it's a very, very strict rule about what happens in the jury room. That's it, never to be discussed by anyone outside of that jury room. 10:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about what on earth is going on in West Midlands Police and why are they just like getting stuff off social media when they're making decisions about whether or not the fans from another team can come and play a match in their city, because the evidence that they gave to the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday was frankly a joke, and yet Chief Constable still in his job. We're going to talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me. 10:53 is the time. Let's talk right now about what on earth went on at the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday when the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, Craig Guildford, and other senior figures in the police were asked questions about the decision to basically ban fans from Maccabi Tel Aviv from joining fans in Aston Villa at a match in the city in early November. The police, it turns out, not only just made up what had happened at a match in Amsterdam some months earlier, they also cited events at an entirely fictitious football match involving another team, West Ham, that had never actually taken place. Well, let's talk about this with Yosef Haddad. He's a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. He's also an Arab-Israeli journalist. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this, more and more is emerging about the decision. Many people, including me, outraged at the decision to ban the Maccabi fans in the first place, the argument being that they'd been causing trouble. Now, you and I both know, anyone who follows football knows that actually there is a bit of a reputation for that team, a hardcore element, as with many other teams around the world where there are some fans who do cause trouble. However, the reason basically given by the police, by the council, was the trouble in Amsterdam at a previous match, when Amsterdam police have since said, no, what you said, them causing trouble, is simply not true and is not what the court records show, or indeed what we told you. So they pretty much made that up, didn't they?
Absolutely. But let's talk about the evidence and the truth here. And the facts. Very simple. If without the approach of the MP Ayub Khan to the police,
just to clarify, he's one of those independent MPs, basically an MP for Gaza. And he approached the police and said they shouldn't be allowed.
And I'm not ashamed to say, I'm not ashamed also to say where he comes from. He is a Pakistani, British extremist, Islamist, who actually have a problem with Israel and is an anti-Semite. If people want to be politically correct about it, go ahead. I'm not going to be politically correct about it. I'm going to say it as it is and how I see it.
I have to say, for legal reasons, he's not here to defend himself. So,
well, you know what? Maybe you should next time put him in front of me so I can actually smack some sense into him and facts, basically facts. But in that matter, this is what I think of him. That is my thought of him, and I will not change it. And if he wouldn't be approaching the police, none of it even would happen. The police wouldn't even care about it because none of the evidence before that suggested that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans are a problem. Okay, and further than that, as we see in the report, they spoke about West Ham United, never happened. They spoke about the fact that vaguely saying people were thrown into the river. Oh yeah, it was Maccabi Tel Aviv fans thrown into the river by a Moroccan immigrants, extremists who flooded the streets of Amsterdam. Yeah. And further than that, if we want to look at the action of what happened in the match, Julia, you know that the average arrest in an English football match is about 4 people arrested in it with an away fans. Yeah. The average arrest in that match without an away fan was over 10, 11 people. So that itself says who was the problem. Now, let's just address the Chief Constable of West Midland Police. Mm-hmm. I have to be also here quite clear about it. He's a liar. He lied. He lied in that testimony. He lied by putting that report. He and his officers needs to resign, quit, and goodbye, because they simply admitted we could not keep the safety of Aston Villa fans and Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. So our choice was to lie and to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans.
And there have been many people who have made the same point, that it's untenable for him to continue, and that the threat did not come from the away fans. The threat came from Islamist extremists in Birmingham. Some may or may not have been Aston Villa fans or not, but Lord Austin, who has been very outspoken on anti-Semitism in this country, and he's been very clear. He talked about the Chief Constable making the shameful decision after gathering what he called dubious intelligence from unnamed, unaccountable Dutch sources, meeting an anti-Israeli independent MP and having used an AI social media scraping tool that generated, he said, entirely fabricated information about a previous Maccabi match that never actually happened. And he says, what does that say about the state of policing in Birmingham today? That they are open to political influence and are unable to adequately review and evaluate the quality of evidence. That's terrifying just for anyone in Birmingham or travels to Birmingham, let alone just this match. But what should the outcome be? This Chief Constable has to go, in your view?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the evidence to the fact that he's saying, I cannot vouch for the safety of the away fans, but also I cannot vouch for the safety of the local fans. Look, I was in Aston Villa. I was in Villa Park. I went there on the 6th of November. And not only I went there, I saw in my own eyes, so no one can lie to me, okay? So basically what happened is that Aston Villa fans were absolutely amazing. And I managed even to go inside the stadium. I watched the game, and at some point, someone recognized me. Someone who's not even an Aston Villa fan recognized me and asked the police to kick me out. It was Aston Villa fans who insisted on keeping me in the stadium.
Very interesting.
Okay? So that is the fact.
It was Islamist troublemakers who were the problem, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, rather than, and basically the police played along because they're not willing to stand up to them. And once again, as we see the marches, pro-Palestinian marches in London, it is ordinary, Jews and other ordinary people who basically are told, you're going to be the problem and we're going to deal with you, rather than those who are basically causing the problem. Joseph Hadid, Maccabi Tel Aviv fan, Arab Israeli journalist, thank you very much. I know Benedict Spence, big football fan. I know he's got strong views on this. We're going to bring his thoughts into my next conversation with him after the top of the hour. Lots more top guests coming as well. More calls from you as well. Your thoughts on all the big stories we're talking about. Rachel Reeves, jury trials, NHS strikes, and indeed, anti-Semitism of the police. Goodness knows what. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and lots more to talk about. My guest joining me all today, Conservative commentator Benedict Spence, still with me in the studio. Get his thoughts on all the big stories, and I want to hear yours as well. In particular, I want to hear from you about how Rachel Reeves is still in a job. I want to hear from you particularly about jury trials, as the Justice Secretary David Lammy is going to announce later today that courts, he says, can't cling on to jury trials for the sake of tradition. No, it's not tradition, mate. It's because it works. It's what well, pretty much all the Anglosphere countries with the strongest democracies do, for a very good reason. It dates all the way back 110 years to Magna Carta, the right to basically only have your freedom taken away from the judgment of your peers. Well, 12 men and women, good and true, are those who get to decide in the most serious cases. He wants to take away a lot of those cases. It's been watered down since last week, but how much are you worried about this? Could you give us a call about that? Plus, we're also talking about the... Okay, we go again. I do apologise, everyone. You know, I've had this all the last week. It keeps on going. Latest bug doing the rounds in London. We're going to be talking about the Health Secretary Wes Streeting accusing junior doctors of a cynical attempt to wreck Christmas with the latest 5-day walkouts. And we're also going to be talking about new powers for officials to order illegal migrants to remove their clothes, under new powers to search them and to seize their phones, electronic devices or SIM cards. How the hell were they not already able to do that? That's madness. You know, by the way, later in the show, we're going to be talking about... the Homeland Security Secretary in America, echoing after a meeting with Donald Trump, a plan to basically ban all entry to the United States from, let's face it, the basket case countries that are delivering the largest amount of people who are criminals to their countries. And I've got to be honest, you look down the list, you're thinking, yeah, I think we could probably do without a lot of those people in our country too, if you look at those who are more likely, not everybody, of course not everybody who comes from any particular country is a criminal, of course not, but in terms of the likelihood of them being convicted of a crime, much higher for some countries than others. Maybe that should be more of a factor in our immigration policy. Throwing that out there. Lots to learn on that front. Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts on all of the big stories, in particular, as I say, on the plan to get rid of jury trials for many cases. What is your reaction to David Lammy's plan? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Once again, a big hello to Benedict Spence. Morning to you.
Hello.
I do want to let you get your chance to have a say back on the Maccabi Tel Aviv match. And I mean, there's just no doubt at all that police in the West Midlands, and I know this isn't the lead story, but it does go towards, when we talk about like what happens in jury trials, when we talk about trust in politicians, the fact that an awful lot of us who would have been brought up, I'm guessing you and I were both brought up in homes where, of course, you trust the police. Why wouldn't you trust the police? If the police are going to literally make up stuff, I mean, make up stuff, not able to actually look at official court records or what, like the Amsterdam police have said about the propensity of, you know, Tel Aviv Maccabi fans to be, or sorry, Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to be violent. Or what happened in Amsterdam? There was basically what was called a Jew hunt. A Jew hunt organised by Islamist extremists in Amsterdam, not football fans, just Islamist extremists. They knew there'd be a load of Jewish Israelis, so they decided to go out and try. It's a miracle that people didn't die. It's as simple as that. Virtually all the people convicted in trials as well of that were those people, not the football fans. That's your giveaway. And yet, for some reason, Westminster Police used that and another completely made-up, never-happened match and various things online as an excuse to basically ban fans from attending a football match in Birmingham, when the real issue was Islamist extremists in Birmingham who were going to try and attack those Jewish fans. That's what was really going to happen. Can we trust a single word a Chief Constable says?
I think in this case, from going forward until there are some serious recriminations for members of the force, then no. I think we all understand, actually, that was what was going on at the time. It's that actually police feel, correctly, if we're being honest here, that the critical mass of active people in this area, politically motivated people, do come from certain communities, the Pakistani community being perhaps the largest one. They're highly motivated, they will turn up, they will cause trouble, and it wouldn't have just been with the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, it would have also been with the Aston Villa fans, and there was trouble at the ground between...
Even though those fans were banned, there was trouble. And
exactly.
there was a huge amount of anti-Semitic graffiti everywhere as well.
The Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were not allowed to go there, but there was trouble, actually, with protesters turning up, and the normal Aston Villa fans going, well, what on earth is this? This is our football match. What on earth is it that you're doing muscling in on all of this? The police obviously feel that they can't say this, for the same reason probably that they felt that they couldn't say things about, for instance, grooming gangs, because community relations and all that sort of thing. There is just an ongoing pattern here of police. We all understand what's going on. Everybody, it's not a secret, but there is still that sense, because we are British and it's a polite society, that you can't say the obvious thing, and it's a thing that is holding us back. The obfuscation, the avoiding of the truth.
A police force that's afraid of facts is not a police force.
Like South Yorkshire Police, exactly.
Yeah, but
it's basically lawless.
But this is the thing. Decades. But if you're basically saying, and we saw this after the Southport attack and the riots, so one group told, oh, could you go back to your mosque and put your machetes down, please? I do mean literally told that. I'm not paraphrasing. And other people being arrested and imprisoned for things they posted online. Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, you're into a situation where when we see the pro-Palestinian marches and Jews being told, can you not be openly Jewish because it's provocative? When they stopped UKIP marching in the East End because it would be provocative. We know they were trying to be provocative. But the thing is, if you can be provoked, you could put God, many different people. You can put a Remain march down my street. It's not going to provoke me to violence.
No, well.
No, I'm able to actually contain myself. If people are provoked to violence by a peaceful demonstration, I can go out and shout at them. I can wave my, my union flag at them. But I wouldn't be provoked to violence. If you are going to be provoked into violence by people peacefully demonstrating, you are the problem, not the peaceful demonstrators. No matter how heinous some of the views are. Say, for instance, if people are racist, if people are, Nazis marching down the street. I've been on an anti-Nazi march. I went on an anti-Nazi march randomly in Germany, not that random.
In 1935?
No, I'm not. I am old, not that old. In 1992, I know exactly when it was. I was living in Germany.
There at that time.
And it was rather good fun. I mean, these are clearly awful people, and I don't mean what people call far right now. You, me, anyone who thinks we should have borders. I mean,
outside, all of that,
literal Nazis.
Yeah.
Okay, but I didn't feel the need for violence. You just make their lives difficult by always being in the way.
But of course, we're not even talking about a protest here. We're talking about people just wanting to go to a football match, not making political points or anything like that.
Can we take the politics out of football for the Eurovision football? Can we take the politics out, please?
Oh, well, of course, we're doing the Israelis a massive favour if we ban them from Eurovision. Actually, that would make their lives a lot more simple. But of course, the funny thing about that, of course, was when Israel does compete in the Eurovision Song Contest, it actually does rather well, because it turns out the world is not, in fact, universally anti-Semitic, as much as the hardcore likes to shout about genocide and XYZ. We actually quite like them as people. They tend to be quite civilised. We enjoy that.
Well, exactly. Let's go back to the small matter of jury trials. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, has been doing that really irritating thing. So a memo that's gone round Cabinet gets leaked last week. We all are outraged. We're then told it's going to be watered down. But originally we're talking about getting rid of jury trials, going much further than the recommendations from a paper written by Sir Brian Levison, looking at, how do we speed up jury trials and the like, how do you speed up criminal trials and get rid of the backlog of about 80,000 cases. And one of the issues was jury trials. Although everyone who works in this criminal justice system points out this is the least important issue, is actually that you haven't got any court sitting at all. A jury trial still requires barristers and courts and judge. Those are the people you're lacking rather than the jury. The jury has to turn up. They're legally required to. I know, because I did it a couple of years ago. And you're not paying us a load of money, because, the expenses are dire, by the way. But this is the thing. So he's wanted to go even further than what he was saying, which is a case that, for instance, you get more than a 3-year jail sentence, could stay in the magistrate's court, or you could go to this different layer where you've got a judge and 2 lay magistrates sitting, and that would be a fair sort of compromise. He was basically going, no, 5 years max, otherwise you have just a single judge, no jury, unless it's a rape, manslaughter, murder, or a couple of other serious crimes. Massive outcry from anyone who knows anything about the justice system. Now backtracking on it, does a media round pointlessly this morning basically saying, I can't tell you what I want to tell you because I have to tell you the Commons first. Utterly pointless. Do the media round tomorrow so we can discuss it with you after you've announced it, for goodness sake. Not that he'd come on this show. Oh, David, I do miss you. I do miss you. Come on any time. But he's saying you can't cling on to jury trials for the sake of tradition. It's not tradition. It's what works.
Yes, it's justice. It's just traditional. Is that what we're getting rid of? The fact of the matter is, you know, we've discussed this at great length, but are we really going to concentrate all of this power into the hands of one individual and then think about actually the amount of pressure that is then put on that individual, the workload that goes onto them? Those people will make mistakes, and then no doubt they'll get it in the neck. For what? Having to take on the work of previously 12 people? Yeah. That's as much as part of it as anything else. It's differing views, it's sharing the load. It's also so that if somebody makes a mistake, the burden of blame does not fall on one individual. It's up to an entire jury to have made that mistake. There's a fairness that comes to this as well. You know, we've all been kicking judges this morning, and that's, you know, right and fun sometimes, but we also have to look at it slightly in terms of the overall fairness. Is it fair to put all of that additional effort on a judge, and if they get it wrong... I'm serious about
that's
this.
the least of my worries. They've signed up for the job, and they're sentencing people. And my point is that, you know, one individual person is unlikely, even though he's an expert, well, you can be an expert in the law, but you're not an expert in whether or not you're making a judgment whether he's telling the truth or she's telling the truth.
But is it fair
we're
to
ordinary
the system?
common people. We're able to make that judgment. We make that judgment every single day.
But this is my point. Is it fair to the overall system? And the system actually does matter, because the justice system is the legitimacy by which the state exists. If you put all of that pressure on fewer points, pressure points, they will start to buckle over time. And then questions about the legitimacy of the system itself will become
And we've
justified.
already got those questions over sentencing.
Yes, and then you're blaming individual judges and you're blaming the system. That's not actually fair. And it's not fair on them. It's not fair on us, because this is supposed to be keeping us all safe and our rights.
But also, there isn't a system whereby they are vetting people from juries because they vote for reform or hold certain views. I mean, no, but then quite reasonably. Whereas judges, I know people who are judges genuinely. Okay, I'm sure there are lots of right-wing judges. The old school, public school.
Some of them are still alive.
Yes. Some of them are still alive. But actually, the newbies coming up, they are being really strict. Honestly, you have to pass these DEI things. You have to go along for all of that. Well, you have to pretend to go along for all of that nonsense. The idea that they're in any way completely separate from government. What was the point of Keir Starmer after the Southport riots going on television and saying we're going to throw the book at these people? And they were definitely 100% clearer. They were stronger, tougher sentences, as they were after the 2011 riots in London and elsewhere. There were stronger sentences handed down because it was all about the deterrence effect. Sorry. That's not within the remit of judges to just go, because of this wider concern. That's not what they're supposed to do. So they were clearly politically influenced by that.
This is something else that actually has to be said about the nonsense of the idea of Labour and the left's idea about egalitarianism or dragging people up and improving the lives of everybody so that everybody is equal. They want to preserve this effectively elitist position because, as you say, the judges and the lawyers, they come from the exact same background and they have the exact same views. If you try to expand that to the general population, to the poor, the working class, good Lord, they might bring in slightly untoward views on things like immigration and patriotism. You couldn't possibly have that. It is a closed shop.
But I think Robert Jenrick nailed it when we spoke to him about an hour ago on the show, the Shadow Justice Secretary, that this is a government, this is a party that doesn't trust the people. They got it wrong on Brexit. They got it wrong, on this or that. They think we're wrong about net zero. We're wrong about, the trans issue. Wrong about actually the common sense of the ordinary man or woman in the street is clearly way beyond the anything that your average Labour politician can grasp. It's the fact that the average person, including the average Labour voter, is opposed to the scrapping of the two-child benefit gap. That tells you people who live in the real world, they get it. They have they're better judges of character. They're better judges, and a lot of these court cases, a lot of it does come down to who's telling the truth. And people make those judgments every single day in their working and their personal lives.
And, well, I mean, the way you phrased it there, the government doesn't trust the people. They're right not to trust the people because the people have clocked them. That's the thing. Actually, they're entirely justified.
Don't let us be in charge, guys.
It may be morally bankrupt, but if we were in their position and we held the views they would, we would absolutely be behaving this way because we know the clock is ticking and sooner or later it's all going to come collapsing down.
I really, really do hope it does. When people say this is terrible, like this budget and the trust, and we get to come on to Rachel Reeves, part of me is just like, no, this is a good thing. We need to hit rock bottom. We are in drug addict, alcoholic territory of let's just keep just saying, no, we want more money spent on this, more money spent on that, but no, don't tax me, just tax those people of it. No, now the chickens are coming home to roost. People are feeling the pain. We are seeing the abject incompetence and the lies of this government. I mean, you thought the last lot, the Tories, were bad. Good grief, this lot are giving them a run for their money. And people need to hit rock bottom in this. We need to see just how bad these are. Like, people go, well, try them. Well, we'll try them. No, they're just as bad. We need a full shake-up of the system, and that's what I think an awful lot of our audience are wanting, and I think we should be wanting it. Rachel Reeves blatantly lied to the public, lied to Parliament, lied to the Cabinet, about the Office Budget Responsibilities reports and what the numbers were in terms of was there a black hole, wasn't there a black hole. She then made political decisions. She told us she wasn't going to put our taxes up. She has put our taxes up. It's not for infrastructure or doing anything good like better education or getting rid of waiting lists. No, she's put our taxes up to give to a load of feckless people who are claiming they've got anxiety and ADHD and can't go to work. I mean, I'm sorry. The woman should be out of her job. Should have been out of her job before she even got a job. She's so incompetent and useless. She is promoted way beyond her ability. Rachel from accounts should be gone. Why won't the Prime Minister get rid of her?
Because when she goes, he is effectively defenceless. That's, she is the human flag. Yes, that's exactly what she is. A bit, every Prime Minister has them, for particularly unpopular things. I remember Priti Patel played that role in the Home Office for Boris Johnson. He could blame her for everything that was going horribly wrong. It was all on her. This is the exact same situation. Labour's major issue, somehow, more than immigration, is the state of the economy, and therefore she is there to take the brunt. She can keep doing that for a little bit of time. I think she's probably got one more statement, one more budget left in her, at which point everybody will then have their taxes put up again, because all this is a sticking plaster before the next lot of increases come. But what she's done, obviously, I don't think she's shaken confidence in the government, because there was not really much confidence in the government left, but the finances of the country and the perception internationally by international lenders, by the bond market, it's all looking at us and going, none of this is good. International investors are going, I wouldn't risk this. I don't know what's going to come next.
No, and also young people, I know, sort of young. I know he dresses like he's 85, but he is actually young.
Allegedly. I've just had a difficult life under this government.
Really tough paper round. A lot of you're probably delivering Country Life or something, weren't you? Not the local
on my horse and carriage,
paper.
yes,
On your
not
horse
on a
and
bike.
carriage, probably. I'm sorry.
It takes me back.
No, but a lot of young people like you, I mean, they're leaving the country. They're looking at going, is this somewhere I can make a future?
Yeah, and the thing is,
I mean,
there are a lot of
we
people
don't want you to go.
I know, I know you don't want me to go, but it's one of those things where also you do get a lot of people, especially older people as well, I tend to hear it from, which is sort of where's your sense of duty? And also then from the other side, from the left, going, oh, well, let them go, we don't need them. And you have to look at this in terms of the number of actual taxpayers in this country. About half the population pays tax, but only 9 million odd of them are net tax contributors. Yep. Where do we think they come from? What age demographic do we think they are? They tend to be people like me who aren't getting things like child support, aren't getting any of those kind of benefits. If we go, and if it's 100,000 next year and 100,000 the year after, how long is it
250,000 last year.
Before that tax base is eroded? Where are you going to get your money for your pensions from? And I know people will say, I've paid into it my whole life. No, you
haven't.
No, you haven't. The numbers don't stack up.
Sitting in the Treasury with your name on it, waiting for your pension.
Not for your pensions, not for your healthcare, not for your social care.
And the majority of people in this country are not. Look, they do. I'm genuine. I don't say this to be patchy. I mean this genuinely. The person who sweeps my street, the bloke who collects my bins, they do more useful work than me. I'm paid more than them. They are not net contributors, because in terms of what they take out versus what they paid in tax, and then they'll get their pension. However, we need people to do that absolutely vital work, very, very important and respectable work.
Yes.
We need them to do that. But nevertheless, their pension ain't being paid by them. That money's long gone.
Yeah, work needs to pay for the now and for the future. And I'm sorry, but it's unsustainable. And if we all start leaving, it'll collapse a lot sooner.
Does work pay for doctors? Junior doctors, as were now resident doctors, they're being accused of trying to wreck Christmas, 5-day strike on the 17th of December to the 22nd. Basically, flu season. We're looking at early flu season. Apparently, over the weekend, they've actually already had so many ambulance call-outs. It was like a New Year's Eve. Big worry that we are going to be seeing problems in emergency care. We already have. We know thousands thousands of people are dying because they are not getting care soon enough. That is a big concern. Now, the last strike didn't affect quite so much because they said, they weren't cancelling all the operations, lots went ahead. This is a particularly difficult time because they're trying to basically discharge people and get them back home for Christmas, partly so they can have fewer staff on and partly because people want to be home for Christmas. But that does mean this is a particularly busy time. The BMA would have known this. Is the BMA right to go out on strike? They say it's not just they want a 26% pay rise, by the way, on top of the 29% they've already had, not that backdated. They use some very spurious inflation figures and a particular choice of the 2008 date to claim they've lost that. They're no worse off than pretty much every other public sector worker, and indeed private sector worker, after a result of the crash, lockdown, and Ukraine and the energy bills. They're just not. But we have also got, 20,000 doctors who are trained, fully trained, years of debt. We spent a fortune training them, who can't get a job in training in a hospital, and that needs to be sorted. I mean, I don't mind them going out on strike about that because that's actually worthwhile. We want more doctors, particularly doctors trained here, to be hired.
Well, exactly. That's 20,000 places that should be going to people that we have effectively played or contributed to help training in the first place, and we're just going, oh, well, we don't need you because we want to suppress the overall wages by bringing in people who are frankly undertrained from overseas. And also there's a moral argument. If we're taking the brightest and best doctors from places like Ghana, that means that Ghana doesn't have them, and they kind of need doctors as well. But honestly, it's one of those things where, there are some very well-paid doctors. Not all doctors are paid equally, obviously. It depends on all sorts of things, seniority, region, fine. It is a bit of a priority right now, I think, to make sure that the staffing levels are up to scratch. And I think that the BMA needs to be prioritising getting money and making it available to take those doctors who are out of work, put them back into work, rather than getting pay rises for the ones who are already there. I get that it's difficult, but as you said, they are already doing a lot better than most people in the private sector are. And
I think doctors should be doing better. I think the brightest and the best with a load of great A levels and a good degree, I think they should be paid well. I don't have any issue with doctors being highly paid.
Yeah, they should be paid well, but look at the overall economic situation of the country. If we all have to suffer, everybody has to suffer.
It's kind of read the room time, isn't it?
It is.
11:24 is the time. I want to hear from you on all the topics we are talking about, particularly jury trials. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:27 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. The number to call to have your say is 0344 499 1000. You can also text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Lots of you getting in touch about the David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, saying courts can't cling to jury trials for the sake of tradition amid lengthy court delays. He wants to scrap jury trials for, well, we're not sure. We're going to find out this afternoon just how many of the sort of things that, let's face it, many of us could end up being accused of one day. Karen says David Lammy should stick to what he knows best. Nothing. Oh, if you've seen his mastermind, you will know that is the truth. Michael says it's not a tradition, it's a right we've had for over 800 years. Who does he think he is? Rob says, how can our basic rights be overturned like this? I want to be judged by my peers and not by an out-of-touch, politically motivated judge. Nailed it. Jason says, why don't you extend court times or have emergency 24-hour courts to help clear the backlog? Yeah, exactly. Although I'm not quite sure many juries are going to want to sit, at 3 in the morning. David says juries are not the reason for court delays, which is true. They're slow because judges and lawyers have more rewarding work to do for half the day. That's you're basically only sitting in court for about 5 hours, and there's obviously other things going on. But I certainly felt the court case I sat on, it was only 2.5 days, that things could have been quicker. Although I'm very impressed with the judge, I've got to be honest with you. John says this is Starmer's doing. Lammy hasn't dreamt this himself. And yeah, again, it's interesting that someone who worked in courts would think this. Anna says, I didn't think this government could get any worse. Oh, Anna. Anna, my love, you've got another 3.5 years. Good luck. See how that goes. Let's go to Tarquin, who's in London, has given us a call on this. Hello, Tarquin. What do you want to say, my love?
Julia, my love, how are you
Very
doing? Well,
well.
what's your guest name? He's the most learned chap, your fellow guest there.
He is, isn't he?
I think he's referring to Robert Jenrick earlier on in the show.
Listen, I think this, Jen, I mean, you've covered off all the points. You've done a brilliant job. And all I can add to what you already said, really, is I think that for a politician, a lay politician, of trying to undermine the constitutional right, which is totally different from the privilege, you can't just do it without some sort of plebiscite referendum or put it to the people before you go tinkering with English common law. Because if you undermine that one point, you can just say, oh, guys, let's stuff that election we had last year. We want to change it, and we just ignore it. Well,
Yeah.
it's in the same rule book, Julia, is it not?
And especially also because we do have a lot of law by precedent. We don't have a constitution that's written. So actually, if these judges are making different decisions, and that kind of sets a precedent.
It really does. And I think this is misprision of treason. He should be arrested under seditious treason.
I'm loving your work. We should look at that. That's a fair point. Thank you, Tarquin. That's a fair point, though. But again, I certainly feel like there is simply no mandate for this. When you want to make a constitutional change like this, you need to have a mandate for it, even as much as any government has a mandate for anything. When you sort of go, well, it's like the net zero stuff. Every government that's been elected for the last sort of 10 years has had a mandate for it because it's in their manifesto, because no one was given a choice.
I completely agree with that, and it's disgraceful. But there have been many things that this government has actually done for which it has no manifesto. I mean, the most obvious one, even though they say it's a private member's bill, it's nothing to do with the Prime Minister. It's assisted dying.
Oh, assisted dying. Yeah.
And it is Keir Starmer's bill. He wants this to happen.
And that, again, something that I'm actually very, very much in favour of assisted dying. This bill is this is a horror show.
Yeah,
it's so immoral and awful.
Yeah.
And the Lords are doing their best to try and scupper it. And I really do hope they do. The justice, as you say, that is not something they say they brought.
But I'd like to say just very quickly, because we were talking about the economic situation of why young people are leaving. How about that for a moral situation? No mandate at all. A government says we're going to scrap jury trials and we're going to make it legal for the NHS to kill people. Is it any surprise that people might go, even if taxes were lower, I'm not very comfortable living here? Yeah,
apart from that, lots of the countries people are going to are rather less safe. But there we are. Let's go to Matthew, who's on the line in Cheshire, also wants to talk about jury trials. Hi, Matthew, what do you want to say?
It's just not something a bit more sinister to this than just rushing it through. Because if you wanted to improve the jury system, the legal system, you'd get the judges working through summer because they have extra long summer breaks. You just have to do that.
There you are, then.
Apparently they don't work through the summer. I heard it on one of the radios on Talk the other day.
Right, I didn't. I'll look that up. Yeah, so you've got a shortage of judges because you're giving them lovely, nice lifestyle. Well, what a surprise!
But then, is it not the Labour Party trying to water down our Britishness You know, it's getting rid of the jury system. What are they going to do now? They're not going to allow the truth and the colour. Are they going to stop us flying the Union Jack?
Well, they did try to do that, yeah. But that you're right. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's the idea that it's when the Justice Secretary says, you know, this is for the sake of tradition. It's like it's not a tradition. It's not like sort of Christmas pudding. You know what I mean? This is something we've had for years because it works.
It's our constitution. It's like Donald Trump going into America now saying, you know what, we're going to get rid of all the gun laws. Well, you can't do that in America. But this Labour Party seems to think they can do whatever they want. They're not held responsible for their actions. They just go, no, they're not sacking each other. They're not being moved on. They're just running amok. And I think in 3 years' time, we are going to be a mess. It'll be like McFly where he got that betting book and he killed the town off because he was corrupt and in Back to the Future.
I mean, genuinely, I agree with you. We are going to be in one hell of a mess. But again, as I was mentioning earlier, I have a feeling that we need to get to that one hell of a mess before people kind of wake up and realise we need a lot of things to change.
Oh, it scares me. May elections can't come quick enough, but no doubt that they'll move that or they'll water that down. Or
well, no. If May elections are terrible, and then Keir Starmer has to go and Reeves has to go, according to the Labour Party membership polls right now, it's going to be either Angela Rayner or Ed Miliband as the next Prime Minister.
Can they not do a vote of no confidence? I think Farage is quite correct that it'll be the banks, it'll be the investors that'll pull the plug and it'll force a general election through because they won't carry on. They're not going to keep just borrowing money. There's got to be a point where it's cut off and go, no. Yeah, I mean, they can't keep watering down our constitution. They can't just keep doing whatever they want. Before, you know, I think Margaret Thatcher brought in the poll tax and that's what basically killed her off. Yeah. And it brought her down. And there's going to be something very similar where people go, this is, you know, we have had enough. Yeah, this is wrong.
I couldn't agree with you more. Other than the fact I never thought there was anything wrong with the poll tax, but the public did. No, I still to this day think the poll tax is perfectly sodding fair. But there we are. Thank you very much. I'm
pro-Iraq war. You're really getting
sorry.
the classics
I
out
don't
today.
say things because they're popular. I say things because I think they're right. I know it's an old-fashioned idea. I mean, to put it this way, couldn't be the Chancellor, could I? 11:34 is the time. Let's take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to an NHS doctor who is backing the Juliet/residence doctors on their strike, even though they're accused by the Health Secretary of trying to ruin Christmas. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 11:37. Let's talk more about the doctor strike. Junior doctors, as they used to be called, now resident doctors, been accused of trying to wreck Christmas with a 5-day strike on the 17th to the 22nd of December. Traditionally, one of the busiest times of the year for the NHS. That is what the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has had to say. Well, let's talk to Dr. Basha Mukherjee, who's an NHS GP, not one of those who's striking, but what she has to say about that. Good morning to you, Basha.
Good morning,
Thank
Julia.
you so much. Very well indeed. Thank you for joining us. So Wes Streeting says this is a cynical attempt to wreck Christmas by those resident doctors. Do you agree?
I completely disagree. I think this is yet again Wes Streeting trying to scapegoat the resident doctors for the state of the NHS, for his own failings and the failings of the successive governments. And this is really harmful. It's harmful to the extent where we're seeing violence going up at the front lines for NHS staff across the board. I completely understand that the patients feel disillusioned, they feel unhappy, they feel angry. Of course they would, they're paying taxes, and where is that money going? It's not going to frontline staff, that's the sad bit.
Where is it going? This is the question, because the NHS has had loads of money poured into it. It appears to be a bottomless pit. We're actually seeing fewer operations, fewer treatments being done per pound than there used to be. There does seem to be a productivity problem in the NHS. Money goes in, we don't seem to have enough of the staff to do the treating, and not enough patients are being treated. Where is that money going?
So let's be absolutely honest about the population that we have at hand in the UK. We have an ageing population, which means complex health problems. We have more people in this country who are reliant on the healthcare service than are able to provide healthcare services. And this is where the problem is, and that there needs to be honesty about this towards the audience and towards the public, that
we've got a load of old, fat and sick people, and we haven't got enough doctors to deal with them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in a sense, yes. Unfortunately, this is the world that we live in at the moment, and we have to be honest with the public that the NHS is going to continue to need more and more money as more and more people in this country are going to be crossing that age of 65 and going to be requiring more and more healthcare services. And we've also seen the state of the social care as well, which means that people get stuck in hospital. There are cases where absolutely abhorrent cases of people, and equipment breaking at home, and with no other way to get things fixed
unless they're in hospital.
Yeah, they're in hospital.
I've seen some stats suggesting that something like 10% of admissions could be stopped, but if we had decent, social care for elderly people and disabled people at home, but also about 10 or 15% of beds could then be, people could be sent home if they had that decent care. So you're looking at, best part of a quarter of the beds that could be made available. And people not having to be treated because of those failures in the community. I've lost track of the number of health secretaries I've interviewed telling me they're going to do the joined up thinking on that. It never happens. I do not understand why. It's so the simplest, most obvious and probably the cheapest way of dealing with the crisis in healthcare. However, is it right, with all those pressures, for resident doctors to say, I think we'll go out on strike for another 5 days at a really busy time of the year when we've got a load of flu and doctors are normally quite busy signing patients off to get them back home for Christmas?
It's never right to strike, and it's never the first option. And I want to say that this is a phenomenon that's across the board, that young people are leaving the UK. The best minds, and you were talking about this, the best minds in the UK are leaving the UK. The most economically active people in this country are leaving the UK. The highest earning bracket, the people who would probably be contributing the most to tax, are leaving the UK. And the people who are left behind are the ones that can't leave the UK for whatever reason.
But so we're going to pay 250 grand to train up a doctor. They're going to get into massive debt. And then they're just going to leave because they don't want to accept the pay of the NHS. A lot of these doctors, we're constantly told by the BMA, they massively, this is about keeping the NHS alive, this particular monolithic structure for healthcare. And yet these people are quite happy to go off to Canada, to New Zealand, to Australia.
Nobody's quite happy to leave their family and travel miles away where they only
get to... No, but they're happy to go and work in a system that's quite different from the NHS, not a monolithic structure.
But nobody's happy to be doing that. We want to
I know plenty of people who are happy to do it.
There's a lot of, changes that you have to undergo, etc. But it's at what cost? That's what we have to understand. The NHS is becoming more and more toxic to be working in.
What do you mean?
So we're talking about productivity, of course it's down because no one is happy. Everybody I speak to is trying to look for a way out. That's consultants, resident doctors, everybody. And that's also coming from the fact that the narrative that's being peddled in the media constantly of essentially scapegoating frontline staff essentially for the state of the NHS.
I don't think that is the case at all. I don't think there's any scapegoating of frontline staff. I think people give ridiculous amounts of support. There's the deification of nurses.
But the frontline staff are the ones that get the brunt of it. They face the brunt of it.
What is toxic? I mean, I've had to, go into hospitals, various things myself, or taken elderly family members. What is this toxic environment they're working in? Who's making it toxic?
Everything. The whole system is designed less to actually care for the staff that are delivering the care and more about numbers.
Diddums. I mean, good.
But it's not
I tell you what, you try
it's
working in a newsroom in the 1990s where you're called the C word at 5:30 in the morning and you take it. I mean, I'm sorry, diddums. Isn't it the case that we've probably got quite a lot of people going into the NHS and pretty much every other career now who frankly just want to be mollycoddled. It's all a bit too much like hard work and they have to do shift work and they're having to deal with the ghastly masses, us ordinary people, and they just find it a little bit harder than they thought because they were the straight A student. I'm all for doctors being paid very good whack and having good working terms and doing well. But now they want to work, like GPs like yourself. I don't know what hours you work, but a lot of GPs, I want to work a 3-day week. I mean, sorry, no.
Because the work has become much harder. The population that we're dealing with have become much harder. They have much more complex healthcare problems. They're presenting later.
How much more interesting for you as a medical professional then?
Sorry, I missed
How
that
much
question.
more interesting to have, you've got cases. I mean, you wanted to be a doctor and now you're dealing with patients and now you're complaining you've got patients.
Even as a GP, if I'm expected to do 40 minutes worth of work and squeeze it into a 10-minute appointment and keep delivering that on and on
Why
and on.
Why are you expected to do 40 minutes worth of work in a 10-minute appointment?
That's because patients can't get to see GPs. There's not enough GPs. We have far less GPs compared to other countries in comparison
to
the number of
GPs because you're working 3-day weeks. If you all worked a 5-day week, then there'd be more GP appointments, wouldn't there? And if people didn't have to wait weeks
we have to look at the root cause of that problem. Why are people working less and less? They're working less because they're not getting the hourly rate that they're supposed to. They're not getting the remuneration they're supposed to or they're expected to. They're not getting the support. They're getting a lot of the scapegoating.
That's not the case. One of the reasons why GPs, we're leaving aside from resident doctors, but often people end up in hospital because they can't see a GP and when they need to, is that actually GPs got that big whack pay rise some years ago. I remember my mum getting it as a GP, and for fewer hours, not working weekends, all of that, and then they were able to live on a 3-day working week, not a 5-day working week. That's great if you're a mum of young kids. That's wonderful. But unfortunately now, huge numbers of doctors now want to do part-time hours. It doesn't work for the NHS because we need doctors to be on call all the time.
Well, this is the problem. This is what's going to keep happening. For the doctors who can't leave the UK, they're going to go part-time. They're going to do other side hustle jobs, which a lot of GPs and other resident doctors are already doing in order to sustain themselves because they have to find a way out. And this is going to keep evolving in this direction.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get a tissue because I just need to cry for all these doctors. These doctors who are having this terrible life. I'm sorry, Basha. This is embarrassing.
Whatever the reason might be, the truth is that
doctors are highly intelligent, highly trained, highly educated professionals.
And we have to incentivize them to keep them in the country. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep replacing them, paying extra money each time when we lose doctors and have to bring in doctors from other countries.
Let's come back to the issue. Doctors and the junior resident doctors, they're demanding a 26% pay rise. They've just had a 29% pay rise. Now,
what does that actually look like?
It was backtracked.
We have to actually talk about the numbers.
Basha, I know.
It was percentage is less important. The actual hourly rate is more.
They have claimed, because they use this sort of spurious figure, they use RPI as a rate of inflation from 2008, that they are uniquely hard done by compared to everyone else working in the public or private sector since 2008. They're not. I want them to be well paid. They deserve to be well paid. It's a good idea to keep them well paid, to keep them in the system. However, they are not so much worse off than anyone else, given where we've been economically.
Well, let's actually talk about the numbers, because actually this is part of the narrative that is being peddled, the percentage. No one's talking about the fact that the percentage has been across 2 to 3 years, and no one's talking about the actual number. And I will say that, you know, when people actually find out the actual number that is being asked of, which is to go from £18 an hour to £22 an hour for a doctor who's going to be saving your life, who is one of the, you know...
I want doctors to be well paid. I pay my cleaner more than that. I'm serious.
Well,
I want doctors to be well paid. I'm a nice employer. What can I say? But this is my point. We want to be well paid. But can they read the room? Because we are in dire circumstances. I would much rather that money went to doctors than to...
Can not read the room since he's come in? We've been going at this for over 2 years now in terms of the same repeated conversation. It's nothing new. There's been conversations that's been had when the strike's not been happening also. We can't talk about timing when this is just... There's equal responsibility for West Treating as well, and the government. I
think he thought he'd paid off the doctors in July 2024. Just finally, talk to me.
Can't have paid off. It was about full pay restoration. We were talking about also job security.
Well, no one else got full pay restoration in either the public or the private sector after what happened in 2008. No one else did. And what happened over lockdown?
Well, what about the job security? What about the job security?
I think doctors got more job security than most people listening to my show right now.
Well, that's not true for all the thousands of doctors who are actually out of work.
Well, that's what I want to... Finally, that's one thing I want to get to, because that is the thing I think concerns a lot of people. We're paying a lot of money to train doctors. They're getting into a lot of debt. We are then... only 10,000 training places for these resident doctors when there are 30,000 who are looking for work, highly qualified, you know, skilled individuals. And then we're saying, well, we need to import all these people from abroad, often third world countries, who either need the doctors themselves or, by the way, are not as highly trained as our own doctors. And then we're not giving jobs to our own. That seems to me to be absolutely crazy. Why is that happening?
This is finally something that we agree upon, both of us. That this is
we agree doctors should be well paid as well.
There's the training post. Someone needs to be there to actually train the doctors. There needs to be resources and funding available to actually provide these training spaces. And unfortunately, I will say this, that these spaces, these jobs essentially are being redirected towards non-doctor staff because they're cheaper, essentially. And it's much cheaper to get the same, you just kind of train them up to do a few tasks without necessarily the depth of training, but just, you know...
And then you don't have the other doctors who are more experienced to train. There's a ratio of staff I think they have to have. Basha, it's been fascinating talking to you. You go and have a little tearful session about how badly treated you and your mates are, but I hope you'll come back on the show again. It was really interesting to talk to you. Dr. Basha Mukherjee, she's an NHS GP, very much on the side of the resident doctors. Love to hear your thoughts about that interview. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be talking about the latest figures on migration. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict, I'm going to let you have a quick, just very, very, very quick response to everything our doctor had to say
I
about...
think it was nice that you were able to agree right at the end. That's what I'd said.
I agree with her. I want doctors well paid.
Everybody wants them to be well paid, and that the issue of 20,000 unemployed doctors is a real catastrophe. But I think also, whilst we do understand, yes, actually frontline staff in, for instance, A&E, it is very difficult at the moment because everybody says just go to A&E as sort of the default response.
Yep.
It is a structural issue that we've been talking about for decades in this country,
Yep.
and there's been a lot of resistance to structural change from the medics.
Maybe the NHS is part of the problem.
Yeah, this is anyway. As I say, everybody's in a very difficult situation at the moment. We want them to be well paid, but at the same time,
read the
as
room.
You said, exactly.
Read the room, people. Anyway, 11:53 is the time. Let's talk now about another. A big topic we talk about a lot on the show. Latest stories on migration. Robert Bates joins us. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Hello, Robert.
Morning, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, it's quite a lot to get through. Let's talk about Border Force getting new powers to basically order migrants to disrobe. I'm assuming not on the beaches, so they can actually search them and confiscate their phones and things. Now, I mean, I am flabbergasted that this was not already allowed.
Well, it already is in a way. We already do see that a lot of those that turn up on the beaches are undergoing checks such as these, and we are uncovering a lot of sort of items on the migrants' possession. So this, unfortunately, is another example of how the Home Office is really putting out a measure, putting out a good-sounding headline, and then not really actually explaining that, A, this is either something that already powers do exist in some form, or B, it's something that actually won't really have any tangible impact on the numbers coming across. And we're seeing a lot of this from the Home Secretary at the moment. Of course, we had a couple of weeks ago this idea that all the jewellery was going to be seized in the same vein as the Danish model. Well, that is a power that's used very, very infrequently over in Denmark. So this is yet another instance of throw out a nice sounding headline, grab the attention of the sort of right-wing press for a little bit, and then hope that no one notices actually that the chaos...
Here's a cat, dead cat, slap it on the table. Don't look over there, don't look over there, all the escaped prisoners and goodness knows what. Also, I mean, again, the extraordinary stat, one people smuggling gang alone has shipped more migrants to France from the UK than Keir Starmer's one-in, one-out little exchange scheme. This guy, Majid Belabes, he's 53. He worked with a crew of Algerian drivers to sneak them, this is weird, out of Britain on the back of lorries. They sent an estimated 243 people across the channel in less than a year, almost 100 more than the 153 returned so far to France under this one-in, one-out deal. I'm guessing it was cheaper than those one-way tickets on British Airways as well. I mean, A, why are they going back to France? And B, how come they can do this and we can't?
Well, so they were probably individuals that the EU decided not to give a Schengen visa to, and therefore actually because Britain's tourist visa system is so lax, I think we often think it's sort of Japanese school kids and French families coming over to look at Big Ben, but in reality actually a lot of it is being used to let in individuals that want to come and work in the black market or overstay their visa and therefore enter the sort of illegal migrant population in Britain. But I think it really is indicative that the numbers of how ineffectual that the one-in, one-out deal is being. I think there was a study a couple of weeks ago that suggested it probably deterred the number of migrants coming across the channel by less than sort of 5% or something like that. It was a very, very small impact this has had. And unfortunately, this is because we have a government that is not getting anywhere near the fundamentals of this problem. The number of small boat migrants that are being deported has deteriorated under this Labour government, not increased. The number of illegal migrants in hotels is going up, not going down. So this is a Labour government that are, again, as you said, throwing dead cats left, right and centre in the hope that no one looks at the problem worsening. And yes, we've had a few quiet days. That is all to do with the weather. That has nothing to do with the measures put in place. And unfortunately, I very much believe that the Home Secretary will try and convince the British public that this is a problem solved. And this is before we even get into the introduction of safe and legal routes or the measures that would effectively grant an amnesty to those that arrived illegally and give them a path to settlement as well. So there are a lot of problems being stored up in the plans that the Labour Party have announced.
Yeah, indeed. And again, we spoke on the budget last week, the absolutely exploding cost that the Office of Budget Responsibility and others are predicting for keeping people in hotel and other accommodation who've arrived here illegally. I'm wondering what you make of a plan in America. Now, we've already had, after that attack on 2 National Guard members, one of whom sadly died in Washington, D.C. last week, Donald Trump saying basically, it was an Afghanistan national, so no one, basically a halt to all immigration from Afghanistan, full stop, done. But Kristi Noem, who is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, she, after a meeting with Donald Trump and in a tweet she put out, which Donald Trump then retweeted, she's revealed her plans for a full travel ban on countries that are sending, she says, killers, leeches and entitlement junkies to the United States. She didn't specify which countries, but we'll know, even from our own country, there are countries which have, particularly third world countries, from particularly North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa as well, where we actually have got a much higher rate of criminality. No one is saying that everybody from these countries is a criminal, of course not, or even that all of the people who are illegally entering the country are a danger to us, even though they are already criminals because they've entered legally. But we're looking at countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Libya, also Haiti and Venezuela are relevant to America. But I'm just wondering, should we do this too? And I'd add Pakistan to the list as well. Actually, there are a bunch of countries where we've got a much higher rate of criminality. Albania as well, in terms of our prisons. Maybe we should just say we're playing the odds now. And frankly, some of you people from some countries don't play when they're not good odds for us.
Well, exactly. And you actually look at some of the travel advice or the advice that the government puts out on the certain countries. Pakistan in particular, a recent Home Office document sort of just talked about how widespread abuse of LGBT people was in Pakistan. And you think, well, surely we've got enough intel now to sort of have somewhat of a clue as to the cultures that are prevalent in this country. And as you point out, not every individual will be reflective of that prevailing culture, but they are nonetheless part of that. We actually used to have a red list, a sort of list of countries that were somewhat more sceptical about banning until legal challenges under the Equality Act.
Of course there were. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's like when you play the odds. In all of our everyday lives, we play the odds on whether or not we're thinking someone is going to be a risk to us or not. And we should be doing that in all places, on our borders. Robert Bates, always a voice of reason on this stuff, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Thank you very much. Lots more coming up. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. 2 minutes past midday is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, as I say, and listening on DAB Plus radio or your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is always great to have your company. Don't forget, if you miss anything from the show, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. All the way until 1 o'clock, I am here. Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, is also joining me, and we're going to be talking more about what is going on with Rachel Reeves, the resignation of the head of the Office for Budget Responsibility. Well, he's gone. He's fallen on his sword after his hopelessness. She's done worse than being hopeless. She deliberately lied to us, didn't she? So how come she is still in her job? Plus, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer's speech last night. Big speech where he admitted that China does pose a national security threat to the UK. Yeah, but, you know, don't forget to give them an embassy just across the road, won't you? And just carry on kowtowing to them. And we're going to be talking more about that plan from the US Secretary of Homeland Security for a full travel ban on all countries that are sending, in the words of Kristi Noem, killers, leeches and entitlement junkies to the United States. Should we follow suit? Yes, we should. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the topics we're talking about, in particular jury trials, because the Justice Secretary David Lammy later today is going to tell the House of Commons. He did a rather pointless round of media interviews today where he said, I can't really tell you what I'm going to do. But somewhere between us keeping what the system we've got right now and an absurd and frankly terrifying and rather sinister memo that was leaked, which went round Cabinet Ministers last week, who plan to get rid of jury trials for all but the most serious crimes like manslaughter, rape and murder. But he says we can't cling on to jury trials for the sake of tradition. Lengthy court delays, even though, of course, jury trials aren't the reason why we've got lengthy court delays. And actually, it's not tradition. It's called basically our fundamental, unwritten, but nevertheless our constitutional right. I want to know your reaction. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk in your message on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. All together now. Text costs one standard network rate message. Right, we're going to be talking more about the economy and where we are with the government in just a few moments with Liam Halligan. But Benedict Spence is still with me. He's a Conservative commentator. But Benedict, what do you make of this Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem? She's quite a controversial figure in the States. I imagine she would be here. But I mean, Priti Patel or you know, any of Dominic Raab, you know, got nothing on her in terms of controversy. But just talking about a full travel ban for countries who are sending us their wrong uns. What's not to like?
I think it's perfectly acceptable. I think it's perfectly rational to do so. It's not unfair to say to a society beyond yours, look, on average, it's proven that a lot of you can't be trusted to behave in a way that's conducive with our society.
Or too many of you.
Well, yes, and so until such a time as you've demonstrated that actually if you come to the United States, you want to be part of the United States and not a member of that society simply, you know, using the United States for your material benefit, then no, we don't have to have you in here. And I know that this is such a radical idea to so many liberals in Britain.
I know.
Actually, it is the normal state of affairs across the entire world that this is the case. But there are all sorts of things that Britain is actually pretty unusual about. I mean, we're one of only a few countries where the standard is actually you can get citizenship incredibly easily. In most countries around the world, even if you're born in that country, you can't just get citizenship. We are actually very unusual in that sense, even within Europe, to do this. Our attitude has been so laissez-faire, so open, so naive, actually, about how other cultures operate. This is the really ironic thing about all of this. It's people who claim to be broad-minded, international, the tolerant, and who don't know the first thing about the cultures that they import into this country and have no interest in learning the first thing.
No.
You ask the average British Liberal, the average Labour Party MP, how many words of Urdu do you speak? What do you know about Somalia? They don't know anything. They don't know. They don't care to know.
Well, because they live in a world where they're not,
where it doesn't
impact them. And they go out of their way to make sure they do that. But it's also fascinating. If you go to countries map time, you go somewhere, do I need a visa? Well, yeah, if you're on the approved list, you know what, often for Britain, either it's an ex-colony or best, you don't need a visa because it's us, because they know the average person is, obeys the rule of law and isn't going to be a problem and is being, vetted by their own government effectively. That's the thing. You don't. Whereas other countries, you do. You know why? Because they just want to check you're not a wrong one. I just think I would absolutely institute a travel ban on as the default. You have to be exceptional otherwise for a number of countries where we have just been importing people who have just largely either criminality rate and also frankly failure to assimilate, failure to contribute, failure to speak the language, low unemployment, low employment rate, and you could name those countries very easily.
Or actually,
but then you'd be accused of being racist or xenophobic, as opposed to maybe we shouldn't import people to this country who aren't going to benefit the people of this country. Mad idea, I know, but let's go with it.
This is a really important point, though, because off that list that you just listed there is countries that are actually hostile towards us. Yeah. Pakistan is not an ally of the United Kingdom. No. Here's a curveball.
They harboured a bin Laden.
No. Here is a curveball. India is not particularly friendly towards us either.
India has been buying the oil that Russia, that's attacking Ukraine, our ally.
Yeah. There is this whole idea that the whole world is sort of, because, Britain was once upon a time a great thing, that actually these people who come here, every single one of them is very positive towards us, and that their countries are. They're not. They're our competitors, and your competitors don't want to see you succeed. It would be a bit like saying, the European Union are our best friends. No, actually, they want to undermine us at every opportunity.
Not. Well, that's going to come up as a conversation with my next guest, actually. Liam Halligan joins us. He's an economist and author of When the Facts Change, Substack. A very good afternoon to you, Liam.
Good to be with you, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I know you talk about lots of economic things an awful lot, but I would actually also love to hear your thoughts on just the conversation we've just had, because migration is a massive issue, and it's a massive economic issue as well, but also a cultural issue. But you've spoken out on a lot of these big issues in recent years. Do you think we should look at what the US is looking at?
I think we should look in general. The Overton window on immigration has shifted enormously in general. Until quite recently, the likes of the Office for Budget Responsibility, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in a moment, would say unequivocally more immigration is always and everywhere a good thing for the economy. It generates growth and so on. But in the last few months and years, the OBR and other economists have started to realise actually it's not just about immigration, yes or no. It's about the scope and the pace and the impact, not just on the national accounts, because if you have lots and lots and lots of immigration quickly and lots of it's unskilled, that's going to be a big burden on the public finances. But also it's a burden, it tears at the fabric of society. Of course, that's what we've seen across the country, not least with the outrageous policy of putting illegal immigrants into the heart of communities, into local hotels. It really winds people up and it scares people.
And understandably, given what we've seen recently, indeed.
Completely understandably. And I think this is a trend we're seeing across Europe, a lot more apprehension about immigration, even among very moderate people, from immigrant stock themselves, who have spent a lifetime being pro-immigration and actually being proud, rightly I would say, that in general the UK has been a pretty welcoming place.
Absolutely. But they've come here because they wanted to live in Britain and to assimilate and to live as a British person, not to bring, Pakistan here or Afghanistan or Somalia here. That's the reality. Now, listen, I ought to get to the topic I invited you on to talk about, and that, of course, is where we are with the fallout from the budget, not just us all reeling with tax rises and the huge amount of money that's going on benefits, but the extraordinary situation where the chief of the Office of Budget Responsibility being forced to fall on his sword yesterday after that report. An internal report basically said, this is a major management and leadership fail, where we saw the release of the details of the budget from the OBR 45 minutes before Rachel Reeves was due to speak, and probably about, best part of an hour and a half plus before they were due to actually release it because of just abject security failings themselves. He's gone because of of incompetence in leadership. She, however, is still in the job. Most people, I think, would say she was incompetent, but she's also now a proven liar. She lied to the public on November the 4th and claimed that there was a black hole in public finances, which she categorically knew on October the 31st from a report from the Office of Budget Responsibility, which they've since made public, that was not there. She lied to members of the cabinet, she lied to the media, she lied to the public then, and she lied on the floor of the House of Commons. And yet she's still in her job. How is he gone and she's still there?
I do think she's hanging by a thread, I have to say. Look, this has been, even before the OBR leak and even before as you've just summarised, the accusations, the allegations, the revelations, you may say, of big differences of opinion between the OBR and misreporting by the Treasury and the Chancellor of what the OBR had told her. Even before all that, you know, I wrote 3 weeks ago, this is the most chaotic run-up to a budget I've seen in 30 years of covering budgets.
It was absolutely extraordinary. And again, the fuss about the leak from the OBR, you've got to laugh when pretty much every single thing in that budget we already knew because it had been leaked by the Treasury.
So there are 3 things here. The first thing was, as you just said, the constant leaking by the Treasury of various details of the budget, what might be in the budget, what might not be in the budget. That led to real people making real irreversible decisions and real investments into the economy not happening because of the chaos. People drew down parts of their pension. People remortgaged their homes. People did, you know, people left the country. People did all kinds of things because of lots of, you know, pretty idiotic 25-year-olds around Rachel Reeves who think they're cleverer than everyone else, you know, endlessly leaking and spinning and conniving when actually these people know nothing about economics, nothing about financial management, and are a complete net negative to the health of this country. And yet we're paying them overinflated wages so they can walk around Westminster feeling important in new shoots and new shoes. So that was the first thing. The second thing was then the insane leaking of the whole budget, you know, almost an hour before Rachel Reeves stood up in the House of Commons. That was the second thing. That's the thing he's officially gone for, Richard Hughes, the guy who runs the Office for Budget Responsibility, or who did until 24 hours ago. That's the official reason he's gone, because there was an inadvertent leak, which probably was due to somebody, you know, not quite getting the settings right.
No, but the report says very clearly this has happened before. We just didn't know about it because that's how incompetent they are.
Okay, just let me finish. Let me finish, please. Right. The second thing is the leak. And that was probably due to some kind of settings in an email program when there was it was scheduled wrongly. But the really crazy thing, right? Not the pre-budget spin, though that was crazy enough. Not the leak, though that was deeply incompetent and the official reason he's gone. The really crazy thing, and the thing that's really worrying financial markets, is that you had the OBR, you know, leaking internal discussions between the OBR and the Treasury in order to try and prove that, as you said, the Treasury and the Chancellor in particular had been, you know, not telling the truth to financial markets and the public. That is mad, right? That is crazy that you now have spin wars going on, not just between political parties, not even between political parties and the press. That's happened, you know, since way before even you and I started reporting politics, Julia, which, with huge respect to both of us, was a long time.
Right. Oh, sorry, we have to cut off Liam now. Carry on, my love. No, we can't. No, Liam, you did realise... Are you kidding me? That was a joke. No, Liam, don't be a snowflake, my love. Like... Try and get him back. What on earth happened there? That was
the commitment to that practical joke is that
was
faultless.
A good commitment to that practical joke. That was hilarious. I don't know what's going on there. We're going to try and get him back. It's interesting actually. One thing he's pointing about, you know, in terms of this, it is just like we've got this battle. We've got everyone's at loggerheads with each other. I like that the OBR is actually completely, you know, independent.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, right? I mean, but not so. I mean, not briefing against each other. But interestingly, 2 senior figures at the top of the OBR, they have actually been giving evidence this morning to a committee of MPs, and the boss was supposed to be there. Is there a concern that, you know, he's now outside the tent and he could be, should we say, to paraphrase a former US president, spitting inside the tent now?
Yes, I mean, there's every possibility of that. But I would say ultimately, is that really going to change anything? Given that he's already, well, the OBR has already released the most damaging information possible, which is to say, no, actually, what the Chancellor of the Exchequer is saying is not the the case. This was what she was told earlier on in the year. I think that's pretty much the most damage that he can do. Ultimately, I think it will be something that will be held against her later on as we go on. I think that this will be held up as a moment at which, this was probably the moment at which you couldn't come back, even if she held on for a period of time. I suspect, actually, no, he won't be somebody who actively sort of goes out and starts mouthing off in the press, because actually that could affect all sorts of things to do with his professional credibility as well. I think the damage has been done, though. I think, ultimately, we've all sat here going, oh, well, we were told that there was this black hole in the budget. The OBR said, no, these were the figures that we said. She's not telling you exactly what was discussed. I think we can all see what has happened there. He is, perhaps because of the leak, the early release, he is falling on his sword, and it'll be sort of framed in that way. But we all know what actually is going on here. The Chancellor has been made to look a fool and a liar, and she needs her own.
Well, she made herself look a fool and a liar. I mean, she chose to do that. And the key thing is, she kept saying it was my choice, but she also is very clear, the Prime Minister knew this, and he's been giving her all these hugs. The other thing yesterday was very interesting. He refused to say when he was asked, again, looking very, very irritated that people were daring to ask him questions. Imagine what he was like as Director of Public Prosecutions, goodness me. He refused to say that spending on benefits would be cut at all at the next election. It was a speech about welfare reform, long supposed to have been on Monday morning, and then it ended up having to be like a basic defending the Chancellor's speech. Yeah. But the whole point of welfare reform is, right, the main aim of welfare reform is, one, to have people living better lives and not being on the scrap heap of life and getting them back to work, right, and making sure that the people who need welfare, who really need it, have enough. And I'd say a lot of those people who really need it don't get enough. Yeah. And that's because it's being spread too thinly over too many people. But also to save the taxpayer a load of money. We have a ballooning, is it going up by something more than £75 billion by the end of the next decade, of this decade, sorry. We can have like 400 billion quid. Basically, amazing stat, 100% of the taxes that we pay, the income tax it's paid, of all the income tax, basic, top rate, higher rate, or that income tax, that all goes on benefits. Yeah. Okay, a lot of that is pensions, fair enough. But, people are old, they can't work. But we're talking about a huge sum of money on working age people. He refused to say there would be a cut at all by the next election. We know that Labour backbenchers won't allow that to happen. Yeah. We cannot continue with these utterly unsustainable ballooning spending on benefits.
We can't afford it. Everybody knows we can't afford it, but people are still sort of hanging on in the desperate hope that their little special interest will be the one that is spared. You see the same thing actually when it comes to things like pensions. And again, pensions are going to go up. The triple lock, doing its job there and making sure that, pensioners are shielded from things whilst the working population actually is hit much harder. The difficulty with all of this is, as you've just said, lots of Labour MPs running scared of their own constituents because the number of people who are receiving benefits are greater than their actual majorities. Yep. That's a major problem. Yep. What they're doing now is drawing the battle lines here. They're sort of egging on reform in some ways, because a lot of those same seats are the ones that reform are targeting. And they're saying, well, effectively, we are going to be financially doping lots of the voters. Reform, you're coming in, you're saying you're going to cut the state, potentially you're going to lower taxes. How are you going to do it? How are you going to win over those voters and say, we're going to cut your benefits?
Absolutely. I'm going to get a break in a couple of minutes. We can't get Liam back on the line. I don't think you realised. I was joking. Cut him off, as in a joke about us both being old. I thought it was rather obvious it was a joke. He's my old mate. But there we are. I don't know what's going on there. What can you do? Snowflakes. Anyway, I'm going to tell you just before we go to a break, though, a report has just been published by Lady Eilish Angelini. She's a former Solicitor General for Scotland, and this is a report into crimes against women. Inquiry into the rape and murder of Sarah Everard by, of course, the off-duty police officer Wayne Couzens, and looking more widely at what she says sexually motivated crimes against women in public are not being afforded the same responses as other high-priority crimes. She said, we are talking about leaders need to get a move on. Their lives are at stake. She said that despite violence against women and girls being described as a national threat in the 2023 strategic policing requirement, and it's been mentioned as a high priority for the government, she said that the response overall lacks what is afforded to other high priority crimes. And she said, in particular, crucially, those with convictions, or even just a caution, which is an admission of guilt, by the way, for sexual offences, should be barred from policing. Extraordinarily, that has not yet been implemented. That was considered to be a basic response to what had happened with Wayne Couzens being able to use basically his warrant card to get Sarah Alvarad into his car during lockdown, if you remember. 26% of police forces, so 1 in 4, have yet to implement basic policies for investigating sexual offences, including indecent exposure. Now, most men who indecently expose themselves, flash themselves, don't go on to be rapists, but virtually all rapists, apparently, have at some point flashed. And again, Wayne Couzens had repeatedly flashed himself at women. That, you know, you need to get these men into the system, identify them, try and do something about that to prevent other more serious sexually motivated crimes. So a very, very damning report there. 12:21 is the time. Let's get to your calls up next, and lots of your messages as well, particularly about jury trials. But you're welcome to talk about anything else. I mean, how on earth Rachel Reeves is still in her job? Who knows? Is she just a human shield for the Prime Minister? Your thoughts on that BMA resident doctors strike as well. Are they just paying diddums and demanding better treatment than anyone else? Or do we need to pay our doctors more? Or should they be reading the room and understanding where we are in terms of public finances? Give us a call either way. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:25 is the time. Let's get to your messages and calls about jury trials still coming in thick and fast. Basically, Justice Secretary David Lammy later in this afternoon is going to be telling us the details about what he plans to do, without, by the way, any mandate, with a manifesto commitment to doing this, in terms of more and more trials going to just a judge, a single judge sitting alone to make deliver that verdict of guilty or innocent and deciding on the sentence as well, rather than jury trials. He says you can't cling cling to jury trials for the sake of tradition because we've got lengthy court delays, even though, of course, the jury trials aren't the reason why we've got the lengthy delays. It's a lack of underfunding, lack of funding, lack of court sitting days and barristers and judges and you name it for many years. You've been messaging in. John says, I see an increase in hurty word convictions in the future. That's very true, John, because the Free Speech Union has done some research and showed actually where a jury sits as opposed to a judge sits on a case involving a supposedly offensive message on social media, it's well documented. They are much less likely to convict because basically people think that people should be allowed to say what they want as long as they're not hurting someone physically. Bob says, how is it possible that we end up with idiots like this running the country? Is he really Deputy Prime Minister? Our whole system of government has to be flawed. Brian says this is an absolutely clear example of incompetence. Why are the courts so backed up that we can no longer hold our standards of the judiciary process? Chase says recent events have proven the need for a jury trial. Absolutely. How many people have been to prison for hurty words when the government had no say or orders for the jury to harshly punish people? Dean says this is chilling. It's not about tradition. It's about a fair justice system with 12 randomly selected jurors and a presiding judge. Lammy is advocating a potentially biased judge to wield the axe, a path to dictatorship. I couldn't agree with you all more. Let's go to Ashley, who's on the line in London and wants to have his say. Hi, Ashley.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good morning. Good afternoon. It is a good afternoon. I think that if we've got this backlog, it has to be dealt with. I just think that, if you're dealing with white-collar crime and something that's a desktop, that's fine. It's like clear evidence, so on and so forth, and it's all documented. I think that getting rid of juries...
No, wait, stop. You're saying it's all fine. What do you mean it's fine to get rid of juries for that, or not fine to get juries for that?
Well, I think if you have to clear certain backlogs, if you've got something which is for instance, someone that's committed fraud and there's clear evidence on that.
Well, no, but you're saying no, but that's why we have trials, because there often isn't clear evidence. But what you might think of as clear evidence, someone else might say is not clear evidence.
No, my view on the whole thing is that one single judge can't be trusted in its entirety for someone's life. And I think that the biggest issue I have with no juries is, apart from having no... let's put it this way, a judge has an opinion. He's a person, or she's a person, no matter what. So they're always going to have their own personal opinions.
Of course they will, yeah.
Is going to reflect in the decision. And their biases as well. And I don't care what anyone says, everyone has a bias of some sort, maybe no intent. The issue with not having a jury for me as well is that all they're doing is going to move the backlog from the front end to the appeal. Because...
No, they want to get rid of the right of appeal as well.
Well, I didn't
in some cases, it's another thing they've been looking at, terrifyingly.
That's more terrifying than the actual single judge, because that, for me, the decision that the judge is making will be based on that judge's personal opinion. Yeah. And I don't care what they say, they'll going to be. Yes,
well, but that's the fascinating thing, because we're constantly told no judges, they come with no prejudice, no bias, they're individuals. And then at the same time, the same people who say that will say, but we need to have more judges who are women, or more judges who are gay, or come from ethnic minorities, or from working class backgrounds, because they need to bring their own personal experience. So they're obviously saying at that point, those people will bring their personal experience. It'd just be a different personal experience from, say, a white boarding school educated white male. I mean, so they almost, by saying we need a more diverse set in the judiciary, they're almost by definition saying people are bringing their individual life experience to their judgments.
This is why a jury trial is so important, because you have lots of different people, different makeup, different opinion, and the whole purpose of debating it is to get a perspective on what someone might have thought, rather than factual ticker box and go to prison. And this is the part that I think is getting lost in this, in that the people, I've heard experts that have come on numerous shows and saying, oh, well, we live in the past and other countries don't do it, it's only us in the United States. But the reality is that if you take that right away, you're taking away any form of conscious thought process about what actually happened, which is what the whole debate process is. And we that's why sometimes we get hung juries, because people can't decide, because there is, without, I think it's the whole point of someone being found guilty is, there must be there can't be any reasonable doubt in the matter.
Which is why you'll get a civil case where someone, for instance, can win a civil case, but that person then won't actually be convicted in a criminal case because it's a different level of evidence required. Yeah,
it's probability. It's probability, and these are the two key points with this whole thing about the fairness of it and being taken away. As I said, I appreciate that there's not enough money gone in. The criminal system in itself has been criminal. My friend's a criminal lawyer, and the funding that's gone into them and even what they get paid to do the job is minimal,
shocking,
right? And you get what you pay for, and we're seeing this now. But by diluting it to the extent that they're talking about, you're going to find certain people going to prison and certain people not going to prison. And so you're going to see the same biases,
exactly,
right? But just from one judge. And I think that's terrible.
Absolutely brilliant point, Ashley. Thank you very much indeed for that. 12:31 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be talking about international affairs. I know it was of great interest to my guest in the studio, Benedict Spence, as well. Sama says yes, China is a threat. We've got more meetings about what is could possibly be happening in terms of a peace deal in Ukraine. We're going to be talking to former Royal Navy Commander Dr. Chris Parry about all of that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. 12:33 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, of course. Let's talk right now about many international affairs, starting with the Prime Minister giving a speech last night, one of those big posh speeches, everyone's in black tie and white tie, where he actually did say that China is a threat. Oh, well done for noticing, Prime Minister. Benedict Spence, if we go to our guest, it's quite important that the Prime Minister notices that China is a threat, and yet apparently still planning to give a assent to that Chinese embassy, this mega embassy, that could pose a security threat to our country.
It's better late than never that he's recognised that this country isn't necessarily friendly towards us. This giant behemoth, second most powerful country in the world. But the problem is, it's because we've left everything too late that it's now almost effectively impossible to entirely extricate ourselves in any kind of timely fashion, because China has very cleverly managed to embed itself into the supply chain networks of just about every major geopolitical bloc on Earth. That does include us, and we can go all the way back to David Cameron and the state visitor for Xi Jinping and all that sort of thing. When we thought,
pint in the pub,
where we thought basically that what would happen to China is what happened to Japan. The difference being, of course, Japan was effectively occupied by the United States after the Second World War. But we thought that slowly it would become westernized, that capitalism would run free and that they'd see what we had in the West and that they'd want that for themselves. Fundamentally misunderstanding, A, Chinese society, and B, communism as an ideology. And it's very, as I say, very late in the day, we've realised, oh, they're not interested in being friends. They are interested in using us as a tool, potentially against, say, the United States, if they can influence us and get power that way. That is what we are to them. We're not a major security threat, but we are an opportunity for them to play havoc with bigger players. That's kind of embarrassing, to be honest.
That's kind of what they're doing, indeed. Well, let's talk about this with Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE. He's a former NATO and Royal Navy commander and a friend of the show. A very good afternoon to you, Chris.
Hi, Julia. Hi, Benedict.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, we constantly have this thing where we have British Prime Ministers and Foreign Secretaries announcing that China is a national security threat, is a problem. For some reason, a China spy trial collapses because apparently it's not enough of a threat to actually say it's enough of a threat to a court. But also, we keep allowing, well, we basically completely reliant on them for lots of our economic imports. And then the government apparently perfectly happy to give them this mega embassy, which I'll be able to see from across the road at a very, very crucial point in central London, where they could have access to vital security cables and economic cables to the City of London. I mean, is it a question of the left hand or the right hand not knowing what they're doing, or are they just afraid of China? What's going on?
Julia, it's down to the fact we live in an electoral democracy. Whenever I talk to MPs or ministers, you can see going round in their heads all the time, how many votes does this mean for me? And every time I try and introduce any strategic thing that happens beyond the next election, you can see this blurring of vision and the cogs going around in their brains. And so that's why you get this volatility of decision making. I mean, people like me have been warning about China for about the best part of 15 years, ever since Bill Clinton allowed them into the World Trade Organization. We were saying, and Benedict just said it, you know, culture does not change. And the problem we do in the West all the time in the free world is try and judge the Russians, the Middle East, and also the Chinese by our own standards. And they don't live by that.
And they live on a different timeline as well. And again, we certainly, you know, the Islamist extremists in the Middle East, and also, of course, China, they're looking at multi-generational plans, multi-decadal plans, whereas we live on a 24-hour news cycle.
Well, if you don't have to worry about elections, Julia, you can concentrate on strategy. And, you know, this is the one thing. What I find interesting about this government is that all the mistakes that it's made, they're trying to rectify now. And you think, crikey, they came into office with a whole list of things that were totally impractical and against the interests of this country. And now they're turning it round. What I'm looking forward to now is the Prime Minister saying that we're not going to give up the Chagos Islands.
I was just going to come to the Chagos Islands, because, again, that's an insane move. So I still don't understand why the Americans didn't just say, not on our watch.
They will.
But this is the thing. You mentioned votes, and actually, again, we know politicians here, they think short terms, well, they don't spend money on defence, they don't spend money on police, or, you know, on criminal justice. They think the voters won't notice. But then it comes back to bite them in their large backsides. But this is the thing on votes in China. So let's just watch China as they spend more than 8% of their GDP building up their military and make clear, overt, very, very, very categorical threats of taking Taiwan by force or otherwise. Taiwan believes there's going to be a war by 2027. That's in a year and a bit. And we're just going to sit and watch and do nothing about it. Keep on just giving China whatever they want. Are they under the illusion the voters are going to reward them when there is that war in the South China Sea, and when massive disruption to world trade, and we have an absolute collapse in our economic situation here, and the price of oil and goodness knows what else goes sky high, and lockdown, frankly, lockdown in Ukraine will look like a joy of a period that compared to that. Do they think the voters are going to be happy with them then and vote them back in?
Well, they won't have to worry, because they'll declare a state of emergency and martial. And they won't have to have an election on those circumstances. But the fact of life is, Julia, you know, we're dealing with strategic pygmies here, and they don't think about that. And if you do try and push it their way, they push it away. It's as simple as that. It's not going to impact us now. The fact of life is, Julia, I keep telling people the same missiles that are striking Kiev can strike Kent, and also Keighley as well. And until they start impacting those places, nobody's going to pay any attention.
But the reality is, no one thinks that Russia is actually going to invade Britain.
No, but at the moment they're engaged in very low-level warfare against our infrastructure and our populations. And they're never going to invade, Julia, but what they can do is break all our toys. You know, if they decide to, you know, fire missiles at us, that they've got lots of them, and when they run out of those, China will supply them with more, and so will North Korea.
But they wouldn't even need to fire missiles at us. Their ability to the cyber warfare, we all collapse. If our phones don't work, we can't pay for anything. Our system collapses very, very quickly. Quite apart from what Russia, China, and these Islamo-fascists are doing as well. North Korea, they're working all the cyber bots, all the stuff they're trying to do to sort of undermine a lot of the faith in our democracy. I mean, a lot of politicians doing the job for them. But where do you think we are in terms of Russia and a possible peace deal in Ukraine? Because we've now got, once again, Donald Trump's golf mate and property tycoon, Steve Witkoff, he's over in Russia. He's going to apparently, have a meeting with Putin, could be as early as today. Putin has just declared yet another victory in one of the fortress towns in the east of Ukraine, and basically making it very, very clear, with clear, blatant attacks on civilian infrastructure and killing civilians, that he ain't going anywhere anytime soon unless it's on his terms. Is there any realistic hope that there will be some sort of peace deal that could be vaguely acceptable to the Ukrainian people from these talks?
No. They've lost a fifth of their country, and they're never going to sort of give that up. The fact of life is the Ukrainians can't actually get the Russians off what they're occupying at the moment. It's absolutely fatuous to think that anything we agree with Vladimir Putin is going to hold. I also think that the idea of sending so-called peacekeepers from this country to Ukraine is ridiculous. Unless you're prepared to fight and kill the Russians, you're not going to deter them. And we don't have the capability or the political will to do that. The best thing we can do right now is say, fine, mess us around, the free world and Ukraine, and we will continue to reinforce Ukraine. The best people to keep the peace in Ukraine are the Ukrainians. They're up for it. And, I've been talking to Ukrainians only this week, and they said, we're not going to accept whatever the president agrees. We're not going to accept it. And, we're not going to lie down in the face of this aggression, which you have to really commend them for. Yep. But the fact of life is we're in a situation, Julia, where, Benedict will be familiar with this. It's called the Melian Dialogue. In the old Peloponnesian Wars, Athens was quite straight with Milos, who wanted to be neutral. Milos said, look, leave us alone. And Athens said, you don't understand how things are. The strong do what they can and the weak do what they must.
You're going way above my pay grade here, but I love that Benedict's nodding away, but I'll leave you two to it. Chris, I want to ask you about something that's happening on the other side of the world. And we've got, Donald Trump, who says he's ending all these wars. He's the president for peace, not for wars. But this does look like, the prospect of some sort of, military action against Venezuela. We've seen the bombing of the drug boats and this claim from Donald Trump that the Venezuelan drug boats are basically at war with America. And he's told Nicolas Maduro, the president, that he could save himself and his family if he relinquished power, leaves Venezuela immediately. He confirmed that he and the leader had spoken on the phone last month. He said, I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call. But there's been a very blunt message that he can have safe passage to Caracas if he resigns. From Caracas, if he resigns immediately. We've got these escalating tensions. Is there a possibility of an American invasion of Venezuela?
Not a chance of an invasion, Julia. I mean, I think some strikes are possible. I think this is a big bluff myself. I think basically what they're saying to Maduro is, you remember what happened to Colonel Gaddafi? Yeah. You don't want that to happen to you. And of course, one of the things we said about Libya is nobody gave him an exit, and if they'd given him an exit earlier, then maybe a lot of the fighting would have stopped even earlier. So I think that's the tactic that's being played right now. They're also hoping the Venezuelans might actually say, you know what, we want to get rid of Maduro. You'd think they would, given the state of the economy. Well, we've covered a lot of ground all around the world there. Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE, former NATO Royal Navy Commander. Thank you so much. Benedict Spence, come back in on Ukraine, because these talks, I mean, we've discussed it many times. It's so frustrating to me that Donald Trump totally gets it on Israel, backs Israel, but it just thinks that Ukraine should basically just, it's like saying to Israel, could you give up half of your land? I mean, it's just madness that he doesn't get what the situation is in Ukraine.
It is, but of course we have to see this through the prism of the partisan politics in the US, where for a lot of Republicans, Ukraine became a Democrat-coded issue. And I think that they can't quite make the mental step away from that to say, oh, actually, no, we were wrong about no more.
A lot of them were influenced by Russian bots online, giving the amount of times people argue with me with things which are making Kremlin talking points that are provably untrue.
But the point is, he's not able, I think, to separate that, and a lot of his base isn't able to separate it away from that. And there is, they've been pushing the line for so long, that the Biden administration was corrupt, and it's all to do with Ukraine. It's very then difficult, I think, for them to row back to themselves as much as anything else. But again, as much as we can blame the United States, and that it is very frustrating because they are still the global power, I will always keep coming back to the fact that the loudest voices on this have been in Europe, and Europe has known about this since the invasion of Crimea, which did not happen in the last couple of years. It's over a decade ago. Where has been the coherent policy? And it must be said, because Brexit happened, of course, after the invasion of Ukraine. Maybe if we had looked, I'm not saying that it would have necessarily altered the outcome.
Well, no, the actual act of Brexit.
No, it probably wouldn't have done. But I tell you what,
or beginning of 22. It was a few weeks before. Yeah, the vote was 2016.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about more clearly here is when we were looking sort of at the direction of the European Union more broadly, one of the things we were always told is it's going to turn. It wants to become a superstate. It wants to become a military power, and we were all sitting there going, well, that's a very silly thing. Apart from one major slight issue, which is this country called Russia, on which nobody could seem to agree. You had Germany that disagreed because it wanted the cheap oil, and then you had the Eastern Bloc countries that all disagreed with Germany, and then you have the Italians that are going, actually, we feel quite sympathetic towards the Russians, but we live on the other side of the world. And then, of course, you have Hungary, which sort of, am I in, am I out? We're not quite sure. And I don't think that, as I say, I don't think that would necessarily have changed the outcome of Brexit, but it was something that I often noticed in the build-up to that. This is a bloc that, as much as it fancies itself a global power, it has no coherent policy on this very menacing edifice right on its border.
Oh no, and in countries like Germany, took a long. They were sending, helmets. They were sending helmets. That was their military aid to the Ukrainians. So, you can't fire a helmet, a Russian jet bombing you, can you? Anyway, 12:46 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about whether or not we should follow suit with the proposed travel ban on basically the countries sending their wrong-uns to America. Whether we should do that here. Wouldn't that make sense? It's what countries used to do. It's what quite a lot of other countries already do right now. Should we do it here? We'll be talking about that with Greg Spencer from Republicans Overseas UK. Just to let you know, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, is currently making a statement on the floor of the House on the criminal court reforms. Any details we get more than we actually already know, so just so we know, we will bring it to you here first here at Talk. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. It's just approaching 12:50. Just before we go to our final topic, just to let you know, the Justice Secretary David Lammy, speaking in the House of Commons, has confirmed that he will want to push through changes to the jury system, including scrapping juries for trials where the sentence is likely to be 3 years or less. He was looking at 5 years in a memo last week, but 3 years less is what was recommended by Sir Brian Leveson. I mean, those are some pretty serious crimes, by the way. Either way offences where you can choose whether you go to magistrate court or Crown Court. Either way offences below this threshold will be heard by a single judge rather than a jury. David Lammy claims this could bring basically this could be just 20% faster than jury trials. The idea this is going to tackle the 80,000 backlog is a load of nonsense. He has also promised £34 million for legal aid, for criminal legal aid, which will obviously be a crucial thing as well. And again, you know, both these barristers actually working out genuinely, they actually lose money on some of these cases, which is just untenable when we want people to get fair trials and have a proper legal representation. No doubt we'll be talking more about that on tomorrow's show. Meanwhile, let's talk about a proposal or a plan that apparently the US government is looking at and whether or not we should follow suit. Kristi Noem is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and she revealed her plans after a meeting with Donald Trump, which clearly he has endorsed, for a full travel ban on countries that are, in her words, sending killers, leeches and entitlement junkies to the United States. She didn't specify exactly which countries, but she said our forefathers built this nation on blood, sweat and the unyielding love of freedom, not for foreign invaders to slaughter our heroes, suck dry our hard-earned tax dollars or snatch the benefits owed to Americans. We don't want them, not one. That post was shared by Donald Trump on his Truth Social page. Let's go to Greg Spencer, who's chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, and talk about that. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Of course, this all comes after the shocking shooting by, it's alleged, an Afghanistan man of 2 Homeland Security guards, one of whom has sadly died. This happened in Washington, D.C. last week. The reaction was swift. OK, no Afghans at all. Now we're looking at a whole load of countries having their nationals banned from America. Which countries would we be looking at here?
Probably Great Britain, because of the mass exodus of capital from this country. So, yeah, I think, look, it might be an overcorrection, but you have to expect an overcorrection when you have, homicides from illegal migrants. You've got, 10 to 15 million undocumented illegal migrants that crossed the border during the Biden years alone, just in 4 years. So, this is something that's going to require emergency measures, but even, often overcorrection if you think it is.
Well, this is playing the odds, isn't it? Because Donald Trump has vowed to permanently pause migration from end migration from all third world countries. I don't think we're allowed to call them third world countries anymore, but we all know what we mean. Not the first world, not developed nations. He's announced immigrants who hail from 19 countries covered by his travel ban will have their cases re-examined. So if you're already here, no, we might not want you. Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Libya. Now also in the case of America, Haiti and Venezuela are very, very relevant as well. And this is the thing, we've got the same issue in Britain where it's very, very clear, although much as the authorities didn't want to give us those stats for a very long time, they had to be dragged out of them kicking and screaming. Yep. There are very, very clear differences between the rates of criminality. No one is saying everyone from Afghanistan is a criminal, and no one from Canada is, but the rates of criminality between different countries, particularly countries that have very different culture to us, or very poor countries, water countries, the rates of criminality are completely different. It's a fair argument to say maybe these people are a bigger risk and it's not worth taking them.
Of course, and a lot of the people coming over on the boats don't have any documents, because they ditch the documents so they can get asylum and not have any, investigation into their potential records in their home countries. And so, and let's face it, so many of the people that came across the border were criminals that were, in the case of Venezuela especially, they were criminals who were released from jail and then sent to the border. So essentially what Biden did was turn over the management of our border with Mexico to the human and drug and sex trafficking cartels. It's absolutely senseless.
The numbers that came across, I mean, it was a few million a year. I mean, we worry about, the illegal migrants arriving on our shores off the scale in the tens of thousands. Yours was on a different scale entirely. And what was really obvious was that when people say they're going to stop the boats here or smash the gangs, is that Donald Trump kind of solved the issue. You close the border. It's really that simple. And also the mass deportations. And we know that is having a big impact. It's very controversial. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial about deporting people who are illegally in your country. I don't care whether they've been there 20 years or 10 minutes. You're not supposed to be there.
And it's really, again, Trump derangement syndrome gone wild, because President Obama deported millions of migrants, of illegal migrants that snuck in.
But then they could just come back in again.
Yeah, of course. Well, Biden was kind of the worst offender by far. I mean, nobody came close to Biden. He opened the border on purpose. He wanted illegal migrants coming.
This is the thing I've never understood. I've always thought this was a bit of a conspiracy theory. Aren't they just utterly incompetent and woke, rather than there's
3 reasons. One is because President Trump did a good job in his first term, not as great as he's doing now, but he did a good job in his first term. So Biden just wanted to reverse everything that Trump did. So if Trump did it, it had to be bad. And then, of course, you have future Democrat voters. If you're on benefits, you're likely to vote Democrat. And thirdly, a lot of voters are moving out of blue states into red states because of the mismanagement of the blue states.
Moving from Democrat states to Republican states.
Yeah, and that way, and then what happens every 10 years when we have a census, the number of congressional seats and presidential delegates goes up in the states that have higher populations. Yeah. And so they flood the zone with illegal migrants. They count in the census. And so even if they don't vote yet, the California will lose fewer congressional seats because of the mass exodus.
It's about keeping power. I mean, that's a pretty blatant way of gerrymandering the system, isn't it? Really, because really, let's face it. I mean, I'm not sure.
Good word choice.
Illegal migrants shouldn't be counted on this at all, because once you know they're there, you should remove them. Do you think there's any possibility that a Keir Starmer-led government, you live here in the UK, is going to follow any of these leads from Donald Trump, even though he's been able to smash the gangs, he's been able to close the border, he is mass deporting people, and if he does actually say, you know what, we're just not going to have in people from third world countries with a too high a track record of criminality, if that works and is popular, do you think we'd ever cover it and we'd ever follow up?
Not with this government, Julia, because they're all. I mean, we're having a common sense revolution in the U.S. But this whole government is basically human rights lawyers. They have no connection with the average voter.
Not going to happen.
And so it's not going to happen unless maybe when there's a year to go before the election and they're polling where they're polling now, maybe they get desperate.
And they'll talk about doing it. Greg Swenson, Chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spence, I mean, I'm sorry, what's not to like about this?
As he says, it's a common sense revolution, and that's something that we don't really have very much of in this country. And, eventually, everything that's in the United States comes downstream to the UK. We've had an awful lot of woke nonsense and all that sort of hysteria that's come directly from the United States. Maybe in 10 years' time, we'll get some of this as well, if we're lucky.
Great.
Yeah.
10 years might be too late.
We are quite slow, though, aren't we?
We are quite slow on this thing, aren't we? Ian Collins is here. We should have had a rule here to stop Ian Collins coming in the studio to stop, higher rate of criminality. I don't know.
Yeah, it's strange coming in because Benedict's here, and the last couple of weeks it's been Benedict's moustached twin brother.
I know,
of course.
Well, he's gone off. He's got some more work in pornography. Also, he's got to go and run his Mexican drug gang.
Yeah, I thought you had Ron Jeremy in here a couple of weeks back.
It's a bit of a worry, wasn't it?
Extraordinary.
We're very relieved we got Benedict back.
Absolutely right. I'll tell you who's really good. You talk about common sense. A man who speaks a lot of common sense. David Lammy. David Lammy. He's really good. He's top of his game, is old Lammy, isn't he? Very consistent on his views on jury service.
Yeah.
I mean, does he believe a word of what he's saying here?
Does he know? Does he understand a word of what he's saying here? So he's in the Commons right now. He's just announced.
Yep.
It's not as bad as we thought it was going to be